The rain fell in Montana the way it always did in November. Cold, merciless, drumming against granite headstones, like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry into a world that had already moved on. Jack Miller knelt in the mud, his 65-year-old knees screaming protest against the wet earth, but he didn't move. Couldn't move. 3 years of visiting this place and the pain never dulled. If anything, it sharpened with each passing month, a blade grinding deeper into whatever remained of his soul. Emily Rose Miller. The headstone was simple, elegant, carved from dark granite that gleamed when wet. Born 1995, died 2022. Beloved daughter, 27 years reduced to 3 lines and a dash between dates. Jack's scarred fingers traced her name, the letters worn smooth from countless repetitions of this same ritual. The rain mixed with something warmer on his weathered face, and he was too exhausted to pretend they were only raindrops. His body was a roadmap of violence, bullet wounds from Fallujah, knife scars from a bar fight in Kandahar, burn marks from an IED that should have killed him but didn't. The scar across his right cheek, the one everyone noticed first, came from a piece of shrapnel that had somehow missed his eye by a quarter inch. Lucky they'd called him. Jack Miller, the Marine who couldn't die no matter how hard the world tried. Lucky. He pulled the .45 from his jacket pocket, the service weapon he'd carried through 2 wars and kept after discharge. The metal felt heavy, familiar, almost comforting in its cold certainty. 3 times he'd come to the cemetery with the same intention. 3 times he'd put the barrel to his temple and tried to find the courage to pull the trigger. The first time a groundskeeper had interrupted. The second time rain had started and he'd worried about his body being found like that, soaked and pathetic. Today, he had no excuses left. Baby girl, I'm so tired. The words formed in his mind, intimate and desperate. That drunk bastard walks free while you're in the ground. Judge Hayes made sure of it. Kane's buddy, Kane's pocket. Kane's justice. Your mama can't even look at me anymore. Says my face reminds her of what we lost. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should have been the one in that car. The Brotherhood kept calling, kept pulling him back from edges, literal and metaphorical. Marcus especially, who'd found Jack standing on a bridge 6 months ago and talked him down with words Jack couldn't even remember now. They all said the same thing: you've got purpose. You matter. There are people who need you. But purpose didn't bring Emily back. Purpose didn't change the fact that Jack had spent 30 years as a Marine learning to protect people, only to fail the one person who mattered most. His finger found the trigger. The weight of it, that final pressure point between existence and void, felt almost peaceful. Just a few pounds of force and all the pain would stop. The memories would stop. The guilt would stop. Emily's face wouldn't haunt him every time he closed his eyes, frozen forever in that moment, when she looked at him and said, "Daddy, you're my hero." The phone in his pocket vibrated, once, twice. Jack ignored it, jaw clenched, rain streaming down his face. The phone stopped, then immediately started again. A text message tone cut through the sound of rain on stone. He almost didn't look. Almost went through with it right then, let whoever was calling think whatever they wanted about why he didn't answer. But 30 years of military discipline was a hard thing to shake, even when you were ready to die. The phone came out of his pocket screen, bright in the gray morning. Marcus needs you, Jack. One more ride. Girl in trouble in Arizona. Mike Bennett's daughter. The name hit him like a rifle shot to the chest. Mike Bennett. Jack stared at the words, vision blurring, trying to make sense of letters that seemed impossible. Mike Bennett. Force Recon. Desert Storm. The man who'd charged through a rocky gunfire to drag Jack's wounded ass to safety when everyone else thought he was dead. The best Marine Jack had ever served with, and the truest friend he'd ever known. A second text arrived. Mike died 5 years ago. Daughter's being targeted. Same people who killed him. She needs help. The gun lowered slowly, mechanically, like Jack's hand was operating independent of his brain. Mike Bennett was dead. Had been dead for 5 years, and Jack hadn't known. Hadn't stayed in touch. Had been so wrapped up in his own life, his own family, his own loss, that he'd let his brother drift away into whatever dangers waited for men like them when they left the Corps. Jack looked up at Emily's grave rainwater, pooling in the carved letters of her name. "What would you want me to do, baby?" The wind shifted just for a moment, and the rain stopped hitting his face. It felt like an answer. Felt like Emily's hand on his shoulder, the way she used to reach up when she was little, trusting him completely to keep her safe from monsters that lived in closets and under beds. He'd failed her. But maybe he didn't have to fail Mike's daughter. The gun went back into his jacket pocket. Jack's knees cracked and popped as he stood 50 pounds heavier in his joints than he'd been a decade ago. But he forced himself upright. His voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper against the sound of rain. "One more, Mike. One more for you, brother. Then I'm done." The walk back to his truck took longer than it should have. Everything took longer now. Jack's body was breaking down in ways both obvious and subtle. The cancer diagnosis 3 months ago had just been confirmation of what he'd already known. Stage 4 lung cancer. 6 months, maybe less. The doctor had used words like aggressive treatment and experimental therapies. But Jack had heard the truth underneath. "You're dying, old man. Get your affairs in order." He'd told Marcus about the cancer 2 weeks ago, finally after months of hiding it. Marcus had cried, big tough gunnery Sergeant Marcus Johnson, who'd fought in the same hellholes Jack had reduced to tears in a diner parking lot. The rest of the Brotherhood had taken it harder than Jack expected. Doc had immediately started researching treatments. Luke had offered to donate a lung, which didn't even make medical sense, but was so perfectly Luke that Jack had almost smiled. Almost. But Jack had made peace with dying. The cancer was just doing what he'd been too cowardly to do himself. The only question was whether he'd die in a hospital bed wasting away and doped up on morphine, or whether he'd die doing something that mattered. Something that would justify the extra years Mike Bennett had given him on that dusty Iraqi road. His phone rang before he reached the truck. Marcus, of course. Jack answered, cradling the phone against his shoulder while he fumbled for his keys with numb fingers. "You get my message," Marcus's voice carried concern wrapped in forced casualness. Jack unlocked the truck and climbed inside, grateful for even the minimal shelter from the rain. "Yeah, I got it. And tell me about Mike's daughter." The Brotherhood gathered at a roadside diner outside Billings, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and old fryer grease, but served breakfast 24 hours a day. Jack was the last to arrive, pulling his truck into the lot beside 3 familiar Harleys that looked out of place in the morning drizzle. The bikes were immaculate despite the weather. Marcus kept his Road King polished like a showpiece. Doc's lowrider was understated but perfectly maintained, and Luke's Street Glide was the newest of the bunch, bought with settlement money from a lawsuit he'd won against the VA. Inside, his brothers waited in a corner booth. Marcus looked up first, reading Jack's face with the kind of instant assessment that came from 20 years of friendship and shared trauma. The slight relaxation in Marcus's shoulders told Jack everything Marcus had been worried the next call would be from a Montana coroner, not a diner in Wyoming. "You look like shit, brother." Marcus slid a coffee cup across the table as Jack dropped into the booth. "When'd you last sleep?" Jack ignored the question in the coffee. "Tell me about Sarah Bennett." Doc Wilson pulled out a tablet, glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look more like a professor than a former combat medic who'd saved dozens of lives under fire. Sarah Bennett, 24 years old, lives in Eagle Ridge, Arizona, works 2 jobs, day shift at a pharmacy, night shift at a diner called Maggie's. Her mother Claire is at Hillside Care Center, been there 2 years following what the doctors called a stroke. Called a stroke, Jack picked up on the phrasing. Doc's expression darkened. Marcus reached out and tapped something on the tablet, pulling up medical records. "We got a contact at the VA vet who works in the state health system. He flagged Claire Bennett's case because the symptoms didn't match standard stroke presentation. Send us these records. Look at this." Jack studied the charts and medication lists. Decades of military medical training, coming back despite years of disuse. Warfarin showed up in blood tests, but not on the prescription list. Someone was poisoning Claire Bennett, slowly, methodically creating symptoms that looked like recurring strokes while actually inducing them through blood thinners. Who would do this? Marcus leaned back, jaw tight. Same person who killed Mike Bennett 5 years ago. Developer named Victor Kane. Owns half of Eagle Ridge, trying to buy the other half. Mike was organizing resistance veterans, mostly trying to stop Kane from forcing buyouts of their properties. And Mike died, how bar fight. Marcus's voice carried bitter anger. Official story is, Mike intervened when a drunk was harassing a waitress. Fight broke out. Mike took a knife to the ribs. Punctured lung, bled out before the ambulance arrived. Attacker claimed self-defense. Sheriff ruled it justifiable homicide. Jack's hands curled into fists on the table. Mike wouldn't start a fight. Didn't need to. Luke spoke for the first time, his deep voice quiet. I talked to the bartender, old Vietnam vet named Jerry. He remembers that night clear as day. Says Mike disarmed the drunk, fight was over. Then a second man came from behind, Kane's security chief. That's who stabbed Mike. But the only witnesses willing to testify said they didn't see who threw the knife. Jack felt something cold and sharp settling in his chest, an old familiar sensation he recognized from his years in Force Recon. Mission focus. Target acquisition. The clarity that came when you knew exactly what needed to be done regardless of cost. Where does Sarah fit into this? She's been asking questions. Marcus pulled up a photo on the tablet. A young woman with honey blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, tired eyes that looked older than 24, a smile that seemed practiced rather than genuine. After Claire's stroke, Sarah started digging into her father's death, talking to people Mike knew, trying to understand what he'd been investigating. Kane's people have noticed. Noticed how last week 3 men cornered her in the diner parking lot. Local thugs connected to Kane made it clear she should stop asking questions about her father. Maggie Henderson, the diner owner, scared them off with a baseball bat, but they'll be back. And next time, they might not just threaten. Jack stared at the photo. Sarah's hair caught the light in a way that made his chest tighten. Emily's hair had done the same thing. Not the same color, not the same style, but something in the way it framed her face, something in the set of her jaw that spoke of bearing weight she was too young to carry. She looks like Marcus cut him off gently. Yeah, brother. We know. The booth fell silent except for the clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the low murmur of other patrons. Jack kept staring at Sarah's photo, seeing double this stranger's face overlaid with memories of Emily at 16, 17, 20, every age up until the last time Jack had seen her alive, the morning she'd left for work in a car that would be T-boned by a drunk driver 4 hours later. Doc broke the silence, voice soft. Jack, you don't have to do this. We can handle it. You could sit this one out. Mike Bennett saved my life in '91. Jack's voice came out flat, empty of everything except statement of fact. We were pinned down outside Kuwait City. Iraqi regulars had us zeroed in with a machine gun nest. I was hit bleeding. Everyone else had fallen back. Mike charged through the kill zone, grabbed me by my vest, dragged me 200 yards to cover. Took 3 rounds doing it. That man is the only reason I lived to have a daughter at all. Marcus nodded slowly. And now his daughter needs help. His daughter needs help, and I owe him. Jack's jaw tightened. I owe him everything. Luke leaned forward, massive hands folded on the table. Brother, we all got debts. We all got people we couldn't save. But you don't gotta... Jack's voice cut through whatever Luke was about to say. When Emily died, I wanted to die too. You all know that. Marcus found me on that bridge. Doc talked me out of eating my gun twice. Luke sat with me for 3 days straight when I couldn't trust myself alone. The Brotherhood kept me alive when I didn't want to be alive. He paused, looking at each of them in turn. But I never had a reason to stay alive. Just reasons not to die. Mike's daughter changes that. She needs protection, and I can provide it. That's purpose. That's what you've all been telling me I needed. Well, here it is. The cancer doc started. The cancer's killing me anyway. Jack's voice remained level. Question is whether I die in a hospital bed or whether I die doing something that matters. Something that justifies all the extra years Mike gave me. Marcus studied Jack's face for a long moment, reading all the things Jack wasn't saying. Finally, he nodded. Then we all go. Brotherhood doesn't let brothers fight alone, even when they've got death wishes. I'm not planning to die. Jack almost smiled. I'm planning to win. If dying happens along the way, so be it. The ride to Arizona took 2 days, pushing hard through Wyoming and Utah, camping rough in places where the November cold cut through their leathers and made Jack's joints ache like rusty machinery. But the pain felt good in a strange way, proof he was still alive, still capable of motion and action and purpose. The Harley beneath him rumbled with power, held barely in check, and for the first time since Emily's funeral, Jack felt something other than hollow grief. They talked around campfires, sharing stories the way veterans do when they're far from civilians who wouldn't understand. Marcus told a story about a firefight in Fallujah where he'd run out of ammunition and resorted to throwing rocks at insurgents while calling for resupply. Doc described the time he'd performed a tracheotomy with a ballpoint pen and a pocket knife, saving a Marine's life with tools MacGyver would have been proud of. Luke recounted his son's overdose with the flat affect of someone who'd told the story so many times it had become fiction, something that happened to someone else in some other life. Jack told him about teaching Emily to ride a motorcycle back when she was 16 and fearless in the way only teenagers can be. She'd wrapped her arms around his waist and laughed into the wind, shouting over the engine noise, "Daddy, I'm not scared when I'm with you. You make me feel safe." The memory cut deep, but Jack forced the words out anyway. His brothers deserved to know why he was doing this, why Sarah Bennett mattered more than just repaying a debt to Mike. "She reminds you of Emily." Doc's statement wasn't a question, not physically. Jack stared into the fire, but something in her eyes in that photo, that look of someone carrying weight they shouldn't have to carry, trying to be strong for everyone else while falling apart inside. Emily had that look after her mother and I divorced, like she had to be the adult in the room because we couldn't be. "You couldn't save Emily." Marcus's voice carried no judgment, just acknowledgement of painful truth. "But maybe you can save Sarah." Maybe. Jack poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "Or maybe I just need to believe I can save someone before I die." Either way, I'm going to Arizona. The second night, Luke pulled Jack aside after the others had gone to sleep. They stood at the edge of their camp, looking out over a Utah canyon that disappeared into darkness beyond the reach of their fire. "You planning on coming back from this?" Luke asked bluntly. Jack considered lying, then decided his brothers deserved honesty. "I don't know. If Sarah's safe and Kane stopped, maybe I come back. Or maybe I find out I'm too old and too slow and too broken, and Kane's people put me down like a sick dog." Either way, I made peace with it. Luke's hand landed on Jack's shoulder, heavy and warm. "Emily wouldn't want you to die for this." "No," Jack's throat tightened. "She'd want me to live. But I can't do that, Luke. I tried for 3 years and I can't. This is the best I can offer, living long enough to protect someone who needs it, then letting go. That's as close to living as I can get." The big man nodded slowly. "Then we make sure you succeed. Make sure Sarah's safe. Make sure you get to go out like a warrior instead of a victim. That's what brothers do." Eagle Ridge, Arizona looked like every other dying town Jack had seen across the American Southwest. A main street with more empty storefronts than occupied ones, buildings that had been beautiful 50 years ago, now crumbling into genteel decay, and a population that skewed heavily toward the elderly and the stubborn. The kind of place young people fled and old people clung to out of habit or poverty, or both. Maggie's Diner sat at the intersection of Main and 3rd, a low brick building with a neon sign that flickered red in the gathering dusk. The parking lot held a mix of old pickup trucks and older sedans, nothing fancy, nothing new. A place where working people came because the food was cheap and filling and the coffee was always hot. Jack and his brothers parked their bikes at the edge of the lot, drawing immediate attention from the few patrons visible through the windows. 4 men in their 60s and 70s riding Harleys dressed in worn leather. It was the kind of entrance that made people notice, which was fine. Jack wanted Kane to know the Brotherhood was in town, wanted whoever was watching Sarah to understand she had protection now. The diner's interior hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floor tiles, a long counter with swivel stools, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly jaundiced. The smell hit Jack immediately: coffee, bacon, grease, pancakes. The ghost of 10,000 breakfasts served to people who couldn't afford better. Sarah Bennett stood behind the counter, wiping down the same spot for what Jack guessed was the 3rd or 4th time based on her mechanical movements. She wore a faded blue uniform that hung loose on her thin frame hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, and when she looked up at the sound of the door opening, Jack felt his heart stop. Not because she looked like Emily. She didn't, not really, beyond both being young women with blonde hair. But the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she forced a customer service smile despite obvious fatigue, the set of her shoulders that spoke of bearing impossible weight, all of it screamed of someone on the edge of breaking. Jack had seen that look in his own mirror for 3 years, recognized it down to his bones. She approached their booth with a coffee pot and 4 mugs, small, professional, but empty. "Evening, gentlemen. Coffee to start." "Yes, ma'am." Jack's voice came out rougher than intended. "Been riding all day. A hot cup would be perfect." Something in his tone made Sarah pause, really look at him. Her eyes traveled from his scarred face to his weathered hands to the Marine Corps tattoo visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve. Recognition flickered not of Jack specifically, but of type. She'd grown up with a Marine father. She knew the bearing, the posture, the way warriors never quite stopped being warriors, no matter how much time passed. "You fellows passing through or staying?" Marcus's voice carried warmth. Heard Eagle Ridge was a nice town. Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment. "It's a town. I'll be back to take your orders in a minute." As she walked away, Jack cataloged details. The slight limp in her left leg. Old injury or just exhausted feet? The way she kept glancing at the door. Nervous habit or specific fear? The red marks on her wrist that looked like fingerprints fresh, probably from earlier today. Doc noticed the same details. Someone grabbed her recently. Jack's jaw tightened. How recently? Hours. Luke kept his voice low. Bruises are still developing. She's also favoring her right side. Either cracked rib or deep bruise. Before Jack could respond, the diner door opened again and 3 men walked in. The leader stood maybe 6 feet broad-shouldered with a barbed wire tattoo that wrapped around his thick neck and disappeared beneath his collar. His face was flushed red alcohol, anger, or both, and his eyes found Sarah immediately with the kind of predatory focus that made Jack's hackles rise. The 2 men flanking him were smaller, but carried themselves like violence, waiting for an excuse. One was thin and wiry with nervous energy, constantly scanning the room. The other was stocky, with a shaved head and knuckles that looked like they had been broken and healed wrong multiple times. Jack felt his brothers tense without any visible signal passing between them. 30 years of operating together created an intuition deeper than conscious thought. They'd all identified the threat, assessed the odds, and begun tactical positioning before the 3 men had taken 3 steps into the diner. The leader's voice carried across the diner loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, sweetheart, come serve us." Sarah's face went carefully blank, the kind of blank that came from practice. She set down the coffee pot she'd been refilling and turned toward the counter where the 3 men had seated themselves. Jack watched her walk over, watched the way her hands trembled slightly before she clenched them into fists, watched her force herself to remain calm when every instinct probably screamed at her to run. "What can I get you?" Her voice came out steady despite the tremor in her hands. The leader leaned across the counter, invading her space. "Coffee to start, black like my soul." His friends laughed like this was the height of wit. Sarah poured 3 cups without comment, face expressionless. When she turned to walk away, the thin one reached out and tugged her apron strings. "What's your name again, darling? Want to know what to call out later?" More laughter. Sarah stepped back out of reach, voice still steady. "My name is Sarah." "Will there be anything else?" The leader snapped his fingers an inch from her face, making her flinch. "Yeah, extra sugar, and I don't mean another packet." Jack's hands were flat on the table, pressing down with enough force that his knuckles went white. Marcus's hand landed on his forearm, a wordless message. "Wait. Assess. Not yet." Sarah grabbed the sugar dispenser and placed it in front of the leader with more force than necessary, a small act of defiance that clearly irritated him. As she turned away, the leader's voice carried venom. "Hey, I know you. You're Mike Bennett's kid, aren't you? Your daddy and I had a disagreement once. He thought he was better than me. Learned his lesson though, didn't he?" Sarah froze. Jack saw her spine go rigid, saw her hand reach for the Marine Corps medallion hanging around her neck, saw something crack in her careful control. She turned slowly, voice quiet but intense. "You didn't know my father." The leader's smile widened, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Sure I did. Marine who thought he was hot shit, always talking about honor and respect. Fat lot of good it did him in the end." Jack was halfway out of his seat before he realized he'd moved. Marcus's grip on his arm tightened, but Jack barely felt it. His entire focus had narrowed to the 3 men at the counter, to Sarah's face that now carried a mixture of grief and rage, to the casual cruelty being inflicted on Mike Bennett's daughter, while a diner full of people looked away. Sarah swallowed whatever response she wanted to make, turned away, and busied herself wiping down the counter again. The leader and his friends continued making comments, each one designed to cut deeper than the last. Jack watched Sarah endure it with the kind of stoic suffering that came from having no other choice, from needing this job too much to tell these men what she really thought. The other diner patrons had all found fascinating things to look at, on their plates and their coffee cups, out the windows, anywhere except the harassment happening at the counter. An old couple in the corner booth kept their heads down. A truck driver at the far end of the counter focused intensely on his newspaper. A young mother with a sleeping child pulled her daughter closer and stared at the table. This was how it always went. People looked away when confronted with unpleasantness. It was easier, safer. Let someone else deal with it. Don't get involved. Don't make waves. Jack had spent 3 years looking away from his own life, from his own pain, convincing himself that not dying was the same as living. He'd let Emily down when she needed him most, too wrapped up in his own demons, to see hers too focused on his own struggles, to protect her from the drunk driver who killed her. He'd failed the one person who mattered most. He would not fail Mike Bennett's daughter. The leader grabbed Sarah's wrist as she refilled his coffee, fingers digging in hard enough to make her wince. Coffee sloshed dangerously close to the rim of the pot, hot enough to cause serious burns if it spilled. I don't like being ignored. The leader's voice dropped to a menacing growl. Maybe you need the same lesson your daddy got. Sarah tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Please let go. The tremor in her voice betrayed her fear, despite her attempt at firmness. The thin one leaned forward. Or what? You gonna call the cops? Sheriff's my cousin. Sweetheart. Jack stood. Marcus's hand fell away from his arm without resistance. His brother knew this moment was inevitable. Had probably been inevitable since they'd first heard about Sarah's situation. Doc and Luke shifted in the booth, beginning their own tactical repositioning. The old couple in the corner, Jack noticed now that the man wore a Korea veteran cap, quietly positioned the woman behind him, hand reaching for something in his jacket pocket. Jack crossed the diner in 4 long strides, boots heavy on the checkerboard floor. He stopped directly behind Sarah, close enough to be protective, without crowding her, and when he spoke, his voice carried the flat, emotionless tone of someone who'd killed before and would again, if necessary. I believe the lady asked you to let go. The leader looked up, annoyance flickering across his features. Mind your own business, old man. This doesn't concern you. Jack's eyes locked onto the leader's, and something in Jack's gaze, some combination of combat experience, barely controlled rage, and absolute willingness to commit violence, made the leader's confident sneer falter. She's working. You're hurting her. That makes it my concern. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the low murmur of the television mounted in the corner seemed to fade. Sarah stood frozen between Jack and the leader, coffee pot still tilted dangerously, face pale. Jack continued, voice never rising, never wavering. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Men who think strength means hurting those who can't fight back. I've seen your type in every country I've deployed to. You're small, scared, and weak. That's why you need friends. Why you pick on women. Why you talk instead of act. He leaned forward slightly. Invasion of space, calculated and deliberate. I'm only going to say this once. Let her go. The moment stretched tension so thick Jack could taste it. The leader's face darkened from red to purple, rage and humiliation warring for control. His 2 friends had risen from their stools, spreading out in a way that looked casual, but was clearly strategic. Behind Jack, he heard the scrape of chairs, Marcus, Doc, and Luke moving into position. The Korean War veteran in the corner booth had shifted his wife completely behind him, and Jack caught the glint of metal in the old man's hand. Then the leader released Sarah's wrist, shoving her arm away with disgust. Sarah stumbled back a step, nearly colliding with Jack, who steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder before stepping to her side, positioning himself between her and the 3 men. The leader stood, attempting to use his height as intimidation. He still had to look up slightly to meet Jack's eyes. You don't know who you're messing with, old man. Jack's expression didn't change. Neither do you, son. Neither do you. For another heartbeat, violence hung in the air like a physical presence. The leader's hand twitched toward his jacket pocket. Jack's weight shifted imperceptibly, ready to move, ready to hurt, ready to do whatever necessary to protect Mike Bennett's daughter. His brothers had fanned out across the diner, controlling sight lines and exit routes with unconscious precision. The old veteran in the corner had his hand fully around whatever weapon he'd drawn from his pocket. Then the leader reached slowly into his own pocket and withdrew a crumpled $20 bill, throwing it on the counter with exaggerated disgust. Food tastes like shit anyway. Come on, boys. This place stinks. His 2 companions seemed almost relieved as they followed him toward the door. The broad-shouldered one had to turn sideways to avoid brushing against Luke, who'd positioned himself by the exit with deceptive casualness. As the leader passed Jack, he paused just long enough to deliver a parting threat. "This isn't over. You don't know what you've stepped into." Jack met his gaze evenly, voice still carrying that flat, emotionless tone that was somehow more threatening than anger. "Neither do you, but you're about to find out." The three men left, door slamming behind them. Through the window, Jack watched them climb into a lifted pickup truck with oversized tires, engine revving aggressively before the vehicle peeled out of the parking lot spraying gravel. Silence held for several more heartbeats. Then, like a spell-breaking normal sound and movement returned to the diner. The young mother exhaled audibly and pulled her daughter even closer. The truck driver went back to his newspaper with a grunt. The old veteran removed his hand from his pocket and patted his wife's hand reassuringly. Sarah still stood, frozen coffee pot clutched in white-knuckled hands, staring at the space where the three men had been. Her wrist was already darkening with bruises in the exact pattern of fingerprints. Jack turned to her, his expression softening from combat readiness to something approaching gentleness. "You okay?" Sarah nodded, but her lips trembled with the effort of holding back tears. "Thank you." "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." Jack's voice came out rougher than he intended, thick with emotions he couldn't quite name. "No one should have to take that kind of disrespect. Not ever." An older woman emerged from the kitchen, baseball bat gripped in both hands, looking around in confusion at the changed atmosphere. Her weathered face creased with concern when her eyes found Sarah's bruised wrist. "What happened?" The woman's voice carried decades of cigarettes and hard living. Sarah's professional mask slipped back into place with visible effort. "It's okay, Maggie. These gentlemen helped with the situation." Maggie's sharp eyes moved from Sarah to Jack, and his brothers assessing, weighing, deciding. Finally, she nodded and extended a hand to Jack. "Maggie Henderson, I own this place." Jack accepted the handshake, noting the firmness of her grip. "Jackson Miller, ma'am. My friends and I were just passing through, stopped for coffee. Hope we didn't cause any trouble." Maggie's expression softened fractionally. "Any friend of this girl's welcome here." She paused, studying Jack's face with the kind of perception that came from 6 decades of reading people. "You're military." It wasn't a question, but Jack answered anyway. "Marines, retired." Something shifted in Maggie's demeanor, a combination of respect and relief. "Well then, pie's on the house. Anyone who stands up for my Sarah deserves at least that much." She disappeared back into the kitchen, taking the baseball bat with her. Sarah gestured somewhat shakily toward the booth where Jack's brothers had returned. "Please sit down. I'll bring coffee." Jack followed her back to the booth, hyper-aware of the slight limp in her gait, the careful way she held her ribcage, the tremor that still ran through her hands when she poured their coffee. When she set down the pot to retrieve menus, Jack noticed the medallion around her neck more clearly, a Marine Corps emblem identical to the tattoo on his own arm. His hand moved without conscious thought, touching the emblem gently. "Your father?" Sarah's hand flew to the medallion protectively, and Jack saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her eyes widened, moved from the emblem to his tattoo, to his face searching. "Yes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mike Bennett. He served in Lebanon and Panama. Died 5 years ago." Jack felt the world tilt slightly, reality confirming what he'd already known, but hadn't quite believed. Mike Bennett's daughter, the girl he'd come to protect, standing right in front of him, wearing her father's memory around her neck, like armor that hadn't been enough to keep her safe. "I knew your father." The words came out thick with emotion Jack couldn't quite control. "We served together in Desert Storm. Mike saved my life in '91. Sarah sank into the booth beside Marcus, without seeming to realize she'd moved coffee pot forgotten on the table. Her entire focus had narrowed to Jack's face. "You knew my dad?" Jack nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. "Best Marine I ever served with. We lost touch after discharge. I didn't know he had to stop, swallow, try again. I didn't know he died. I'm sorry. So damn sorry." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes and spilled over despite her obvious attempt to hold them back. He talked about his Marine brothers sometimes. Said they were the best men he'd ever known. That they understood things civilians never could. Mike was right about that. Marcus's deep voice carried gentle sympathy. "Marines take care of their own. Always have. Always will." Sarah wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara, not caring. How did he save your life? Jack exchanged glances with his brothers, then looked back at Sarah. Kuwait City, 1991. Our unit was advancing when we got pinned down by Iraqi regulars. Machine gun nest had us zeroed in, and everyone fell back, except the wounded. I'd taken rounds and my leg and shoulder couldn't move. Your father charged through the kill zone, grabbed my vest, dragged me 200 yards to cover. Took 3 bullets doing it. Any one of them could have killed him, but Mike Bennett didn't stop until I was safe. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them had to voice. Mike Bennett had risked his life for Jack, given Jack decades he wouldn't have had otherwise, decades that included marriage and fatherhood and Emily. Given Jack the chance to fail his own daughter because Mike had been brave enough to save him. Sarah's voice came out small, breaking. Dad said honor wasn't just a word, that it was how you lived your life when nobody was watching. That's exactly what Mike believed. Jack's throat tightened. He lived by a code. Honor, courage, commitment. The kind of values that seem old-fashioned now, but they mattered to him. They're why he stepped in that bar 5 years ago. Why he couldn't walk away from someone needing help. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes, painful and sharp. You know how he really died. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded slowly. We know he was murdered. We know a man named Victor Kane is responsible. And we know Kane is back in town targeting you and your mother. Sarah's face went pale. How do you know all this? Because we make it our business to help veterans and their families? Doc's soft voice carried conviction. When we heard Mike Bennett's daughter was in danger, we came. Luke added, and we're not leaving until you're safe. Sarah looked around the table at 4 weathered faces, 4 sets of eyes that had seen combat in death and come out the other side carrying scars both visible and hidden. Jack watched her process the situation, saw the moment she understood that these strangers, these brothers of her father's, had ridden hundreds of miles for no reason, except that she needed protection, and they could provide it. She shook her head slowly. I can't ask you to do this. Kane is dangerous. He owns, the sheriff, owns the judge, owns half the businesses in town. My dad tried to stop him, and now we're going to finish what your father started. Jack's voice carried absolute certainty. Mike gave me 34 years I wouldn't have had otherwise. Years that included my own daughter, my own family. I owe him everything. Protecting you, stopping Kane, that's not charity. It's a debt I should have paid a long time ago. Sarah's eyes found his face, reading the grief there, the loss, the desperate need for purpose. You lost your daughter. Jack swallowed hard. 3 years ago, drunk driver. The man who killed her walked free because a corrupt judge let him off. Kane's friend, as it turns out. The connection settled between them, unspoken but understood. They'd both lost someone to violence and corruption. They'd both learned that justice was a fiction when powerful men controlled the system. They'd both been victims of a world that protected predators and abandoned prey. I remind you of her. Sarah's statement wasn't a question. Jack met her eyes and told the truth. A little. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because your father saved my life, and I never got to thank him. I'm here because you're being targeted by the same man who killed him. I'm here because I'm dying anyway, and I'd rather die doing something that matters than waste away in a hospital bed. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. They'd agreed not to mention Jack's cancer until absolutely necessary, but Jack was done hiding. Sarah deserved to know exactly who she was trusting with her safety. You're dying. Her voice barely carried above the diner's ambient noise. Stage 4 lung cancer? 6 months maybe? So you see, I've got nothing to lose and everything to prove. Your father gave me extra years. The least I can do is use what's left of them to protect his daughter. Sarah's face crumpled, tears flowing freely now. This is too much. I can't. You shouldn't have to. Jack reached across the table and took her hand gently, careful of the bruises on her wrist. Listen to me. For 3 years I've been waiting to die. Standing at my daughter's grave with a gun in my hand, trying to find the courage to pull the trigger. You know what stopped me today? Marcus's text about you. About Mike's daughter needing help. He squeezed her hand gently. You didn't ask for this. Neither did Mike. Neither did Emily. But here we are, and I finally have a reason to be alive for however long I've got left. Let me do this. Let me finish what your father started. Let me be the warrior I should have been for my own daughter. Sarah's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Jack wanted to hug her, wanted to offer the kind of comfort a father provides, but he didn't know her well enough yet, didn't have the right. So he just held her hand and waited while she cried out some portion of the grief and fear and exhaustion she'd been carrying alone for too long. Finally, she wiped her eyes again and looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes that carried a glimmer of hope she was clearly afraid to trust. What happens now? Now we make sure those men don't come back. Marcus's voice carried military efficiency. Now we figure out what evidence your father had against Cain. Now we get your mother somewhere safe where Cain can't finish what he started. My mother, Sarah's voice rose. What about my mother? Doc pulled out his tablet. Your mother is being poisoned. Someone's been adding warfarin to her medications, creating symptoms that look like recurring strokes. Given enough time, they'll kill her and it'll look natural. Sarah's face drained of color. Oh my God. But we're going to move her. Jack's voice remained steady, anchoring. We've got contacts at a veterans hospital in another county. She'll get proper treatment and be safe from Cain's reach. When tomorrow night, we'll create a distraction, extract her, and have her in protective care before Cain even knows she's gone. Sarah looked overwhelmed, processing too much information too quickly. I should get back to work. Maggie appeared as if summoned, carrying 4 slices of apple pie. On the house, she set the plates down with surprising gentleness. Sarah, honey, take your break. These gentlemen and I need to talk. After Sarah walked away, Maggie slid into the booth across from Jack. I've known that girl since she was in diapers. Watched Mike raise her after her mother's heart gave out when Sarah was 12. He was a good man who tried to do right by this town. She paused, eyes hard. Cain is evil, pure and simple. He's destroyed families, bankrupted businesses, driven good people out of town. Mike was the only one brave enough to stand up to him. After Mike died, everyone else fell in line, except Sarah. She keeps asking questions, keeps pushing, and she's going to get herself killed, just like her father. Maggie's weathered hand found Jack's across the table. I don't know what you and your boys are planning, but whatever it is, you've got my support. This town needs heroes, needs people who remember what it means to stand up for what's right. Jack nodded slowly. We're going to need a safe place for Sarah to stay. Somewhere Cain won't look. She can stay with me. I've got a spare room above the diner, and I keep a shotgun behind the counter. Anyone comes for her, they'll have to go through me first. The rest of the evening passed in careful planning and quiet conversation. Sarah returned to finish her shift, and Jack watched her move through the diner with renewed purpose in her movements. She knew now that she wasn't alone, that her father's brothers had come to finish what Mike started. When closing time approached, Jack and his brothers prepared to leave. Sarah met them at the door, exhaustion evident in every line of her body, but something new in her eyes. Determination mixed with the first real hope Jack had seen. Thank you, her voice carried weight beyond the simple words, for everything. Jack pulled out a business card and pressed it into her hand. Brotherhood of the Road. Call anytime, day or night. We're not leaving town until Cain is stopped and you're safe. That's a promise. Sarah looked down at the card, then back up at Jack. My dad would have liked you. Jack's throat closed up for a moment before he managed to speak. I already liked him. Best Marine I ever knew. And his daughter is pretty remarkable too. As they walked to their bikes, Marcus fell into step beside Jack. You okay, brother? Jack looked back at the diner, seeing Sarah through the window as she cleaned tables and prepared for closing. Yeah, for the first time in 3 years, I actually am. The ride to their motel took them past the old hospital building. Marcus had mentioned a 3-story brick structure with boarded windows and a chain-link fence surrounding the property. Even in the darkness, Jack could see the potential value of the real estate. Prime downtown location. Cain's next target. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Jack just wanted to sit with the feeling that had settled in his chest during dinner purpose. Direction. A reason to be alive that went beyond simply refusing to die. Mike Bennett had given him that gift twice now, once in Kuwait City and again through his daughter's need for protection. In the motel room, Jack sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. Emily's photo filled the screen, that last selfie she'd sent him the morning of her accident, grinning at the camera with the kind of unself-conscious joy that only came from being young and alive and unaware that death was hours away. I found her, baby girl. His whispered words to the photo felt less crazy than usual. Mike's daughter, she needs help, and I can give it. I know you'd want me to do this. The photo didn't answer, but Jack felt something shift in his chest anyway, a loosening of the grief that had been choking him for 3 years. He wasn't betraying Emily's memory by protecting Sarah. He was honoring it, being the warrior and protector he should have been, but wasn't when Emily needed him most. Tomorrow they'd begin in earnest. Tomorrow they'd start the extraction plan for Claire Bennett, start investigating Kane's operations, start building the case that would bring down a corrupt developer who thought himself above justice. Tomorrow the war would begin. But tonight Jack allowed himself to feel something other than grief and guilt. Tonight he felt purpose. He felt alive. He felt for the first time since standing at Emily's grave with a gun in his hand, like he had a reason to see tomorrow. Mike, I'm finishing it. I'm protecting your daughter, and I'm taking down the man who killed you. That's a promise, brother. Semper Fi. In the darkness of the motel room, surrounded by his brothers, who snored in the beds around him, Jack Miller finally slept without nightmares. Because tomorrow he had work to do. Tomorrow he had someone to protect. Tomorrow he had purpose. And for a dying warrior, that was everything. Dawn broke over Eagle Ridge with the kind of harsh clarity that made everything look older and more broken than it had the night before. Jack stood outside the motel, coffee in hand, watching the town wake up to another day of slow decline. Pickup trucks rumbled past, carrying men to construction sites that would never be finished. Store owners unlocked doors to businesses that would see maybe a dozen customers all day. The American dream hadn't died here, it had just given up and moved somewhere with better prospects. Marcus joined him, steam rising from his own coffee cup into the cold morning air. You sleep, Jack nodded. First good sleep in months. Feels strange. Purpose will do that. Marcus studied the town with tactical eyes, already mapping routes and sight lines without conscious thought. We're exposed here. Kane knows we're in town by now. Those 3 from the diner will have reported back. Good, let him know. Jack's voice carried no concern. We're not hiding. We're here to finish this. Doc emerged from the room, tablet already in hand, glasses reflecting the rising sun. I've been going through Claire Bennett's medical records again. The warfare and dosing is sophisticated, just enough to cause symptoms without triggering immediate red flags. Whoever's administering it has medical knowledge, so we're looking for a doctor on Kane's payroll. Luke appeared in the doorway, massive frame nearly filling it. Narrow the field, Doc scrolled through his notes. Claire's primary physician is clean. I checked his history, no connection to Kane, but she's been seeing a specialist at Hillside Care Center for the past 18 months. Dr. Gerald Perkins moved to Eagle Ridge 2 years ago, right after Mike Bennett's death. The timing made Jack's jaw tighten. Too convenient. Gets better. Marcus pulled out his own phone, showing a series of financial records. Perkins owns a vacation home in Sedona worth $500,000 on a small-town doctor's salary. Property records show it was purchased with cash 3 months after he arrived in Eagle Ridge. Kane's money. Jack felt the pieces clicking together with grim satisfaction. Perkins prescribes the poison, makes it look like natural decline, and gets paid well enough to retire comfortably when Claire finally dies. We need to move her today. Doc's voice carried urgency. If Kane suspects we're onto him, he might accelerate the timeline, overdose her, and claim complications from her condition. Jack checked his watch. Visiting hours start at 9. Sarah will want to see her mother before we move her. We use that as cover. Sarah visits, normally keeps everything looking routine while we position for extraction. The plan came together with military precision over the next hour. Doc would enter through the front as a consulting physician, credentials courtesy of his VA contacts. Marcus and Luke would come through the service entrance, dressed as medical transport. Jack would stay mobile, watching for Kane's people, ready to intervene if the extraction went sideways. But first Jack needed to see Sarah, needed to make sure she understood what they were about to do and the risks involved. The diner opened at 6, which meant Sarah had probably been there since 5:30, prepping for the breakfast rush that would consist of maybe 20 people stretched across 3 hours. The morning light hit Maggie's diner differently than the evening glow had, exposing the cracks in the facade, peeling paint, a loose shutter windows that needed replacing. But inside, the smell of fresh coffee and bacon created an oasis of normalcy in a town that had forgotten what normal looked like. Sarah was refilling sugar dispensers when Jack entered, her movements mechanical but steady. She looked up at the sound of the door chime, and something in her face shifted when she saw him, tension releasing, shoulders dropping slightly, the kind of unconscious relaxation that came from knowing you weren't alone anymore. Morning, she set down the sugar container and moved toward the coffee station. You're up early, old habit. Marines don't sleep in. Jack settled onto a counter stool, noting the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. How about you get any rest? Sarah poured his coffee without asking, movements practiced and efficient. Some. Kept thinking about what you said, about my mom being poisoned, about Kane, about... She stopped, bit her lip, started again. About my dad saving your life and you coming here to repay that. It's a lot to process. Jack wrapped his hands around the warm mug, anchoring himself in the physical sensation. I know, and I'm sorry we dumped all of it on you at once, but time's not on our side. We need to move your mother today. Today, Sarah's voice rose slightly before she caught herself and glanced around. The diner was empty except for one old-timer in the corner booth who was too focused on his pancakes to care about their conversation. Why so fast? Because if Kane suspects we're onto him, he'll move faster. Kill your mother before we can get her somewhere safe. Jack kept his voice level, factual, refusing to sugarcoat the reality. We've got one shot at this. If we blow it, Claire dies and we lose any chance of bringing Kane down. Sarah's hands trembled as she set down the coffee pot. What do you need me to do? Visit her like normal. Nothing out of routine. Doc will be there as a consulting physician checking on a potential patient transfer. You talk to your mom, keep her calm, let her know what's happening. Marcus and Luke will handle the actual extraction. You just need to provide cover. And then what? Where does she go? Veterans Memorial Hospital in Carlson County. Doc's contact there is expecting her. She'll get proper treatment, be monitored around the clock, and most importantly, she'll be somewhere Kane can't reach her. Sarah absorbed this, processing the logistics and implications. When this is over, when Kane is stopped, can she come home? Jack hesitated, weighing honesty against comfort. If we do this right, yes. If we don't... If you don't, Kane kills us both anyway. Sarah's voice carried grim acceptance. At least this way we're fighting back. That's what Dad would have wanted. The door chimed again, and Maggie entered from the kitchen, taking in the scene with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Planning something, Jack made the decision in a heartbeat. Maggie had already put herself at risk by supporting them. She deserved to know what was coming. We're moving Claire Bennett today, getting her somewhere Kane can't finish what he started. Maggie nodded slowly, no surprise in her expression. About damn time. That girl's been dying by inches for 2 years, while everyone pretended not to notice. She moved behind the counter, pulled out a key ring, and handed it to Sarah. Take my truck. Your car's too recognizable if Kane has people watching. Park in the back of the hospital lot away from the main entrance. And Sarah Maggie's weathered hand found Sarah's across the counter. Your daddy would be proud of you. Standing up, fighting back, trusting the right people. That takes courage. Sarah's eyes filled, but no tears fell. She cried herself out the night before. Now there was only determination and the kind of desperate hope that came from finally having allies instead of facing danger alone. The breakfast rush, such as it was, consisted of the usual regulars who ordered the usual meals and left the usual tips. Jack nursed his coffee and watched Sarah work, seeing more clearly now the patterns he'd only glimpsed the night before. The way she favored her right side when reaching for plates on high shelves. The careful way she walked like someone nursing injuries she couldn't afford to acknowledge. The practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Bobby Thornton and his friends had done more damage than just the visible bruises. They'd reinforced what Sarah already knew, that she was alone in a town where power protected itself and justice was a fiction. That standing up meant getting hurt, and getting hurt meant nobody would help you, until now. By 8:30, Sarah had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a sweater, borrowing Maggie's truck keys and heading toward Hillside Care Center with instructions to act normal, visit her mother, and trust that the Brotherhood had everything under control. Jack watched her drive away, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. Mike Bennett had trusted him with the most precious thing a man could possess, his daughter's life. Failing wasn't an option. Marcus pulled up beside Jack's position in a white panel van with Valley Medical Transport stenciled on the side. Luke sat in the passenger seat, both of them dressed in scrubs that looked legitimate enough to pass casual inspection. Doc had gone ahead in his own vehicle, arriving early to establish himself as a consulting physician, checking on potential transfers. The plan was simple, which usually meant it was good. Simple plans had fewer points of failure, less room for things to go wrong. But Jack had been on enough operations to know that simple didn't mean easy, and anything involving hospital security and potential witnesses could go sideways fast. His phone buzzed with a text from Doc in position. Claire's room 112 East Wing, 2 nurses on duty, both distracted with morning rounds. Perkins not here yet, probably doesn't arrive until 10. Jack typed back, Sarah ETA 5 minutes. Hold until she's with Claire, then initiate transfer protocol. The waiting was the hardest part, always had been. Jack's mind wanted to run through everything that could go wrong. Security guards deciding to be thorough. Perkins showing up early, Kane having someone watching Claire's room. But catastrophizing didn't help. Action helped. Purpose helped. The knowledge that he was doing what Mike would have wanted helped. Sarah's truck, Baggy's truck, pulled into the hospital lot right on schedule. Jack watched through binoculars from his position across the street as Sarah climbed out, took a visible breath to steady herself, and walked toward the entrance with the careful casualness of someone trying very hard to look normal. She's inside. Jack keyed his radio. Doc, you've got eyes on her? Affirmative. Doc's voice came back calm and professional. Sarah's heading to Claire's room now. Nurses barely looked up. We're good to proceed in 5. Those 5 minutes stretched like hours. Jack's position gave him sight lines on both the main entrance and the service entrance, where Marcus and Luke would bring their gurney. The parking lot was half full. Visiting hours had just started, and Eagle Ridge's aging population meant a steady stream of people checking on sick relatives. Good cover for what they were about to do. Movement caught Jack's eye, a black SUV pulling into the lot windows, tinted dark enough to hide the occupants. The vehicle circled once before parking in a spot that provided clear views of the main entrance. Nobody got out. Nobody moved. We've got company. Jack kept his voice level. Black SUV, Arizona plates, 2 occupants. Could be nothing. Could be Kane's people. I see it. Marcus had positioned the medical transport van to cover the service entrance. They watching the main door. Affirmative. Jack studied the SUV through his binoculars, trying to see through the tinted glass. If they're here for Claire, they're waiting to see who visits. Sarah walking in might have triggered them. Doc's voice came through, tense but controlled. Sarah's in the room. Claire's awake and alert. I'm explaining this situation now. Stand by. The seconds ticked past with agonizing slowness. Jack divided his attention between the SUV and the hospital entrances, waiting for something to break. The SUV's passenger door opened and a man climbed out, medium build, short hair, the kind of physically fit that suggested military or law enforcement background. He wore civilian clothes but moved with tactical awareness, scanning the parking lot before pulling out a phone. Jack's gut tightened. Whoever this was, he wasn't a random hospital visitor. Marcus, Luke, you need to move now. Jack made the call based on instinct developed over 30 years of staying alive in hostile environments. We've got a spotter making a call. If he's reporting Sarah's arrival, Kane's going to know something's up. Copy that. We're moving. The medical transport van pulled around to the service entrance just as the man by the SUV finished his call. Jack watched the spotter's body language change, more alert, more focused, hand moving to his waistband, where Jack would bet money there was a concealed weapon. Doc status. Jack kept his voice calm, despite adrenaline starting to spike. Transfer papers signed. Claire's stable for transport. We're moving to the service entrance now. Jack saw the spotter, noticed the medical transport van, saw the moment of decision cross the man's face. The spotter started walking toward the main entrance, pace deliberate but purposeful. He was going to intercept them. We've got a problem. Jack was already moving, crossing the street with long strides that ate distance without looking rushed. Spotter's heading inside. I'm going to run interference. Jack, wait. Marcus started, but Jack was already through the main entrance, passing the spotter who was focused on the reception desk ahead. Jack's mind raced through options and discarded them just as quickly. Couldn't start a confrontation in a hospital lobby. Couldn't let the man reach Claire's room and identify Doc as someone who didn't belong. Needed a distraction that would pull attention away from the East Wing without creating so much chaos that it brought security running. The solution presented itself in the form of a coffee cart near the elevators. Jack stumbled, deliberately catching the cart's edge and sending it tipping with a crash that echoed through the lobby. Coffee urns hit the tile floor, hot liquid spreading in a dark pool cup, scattering. The volunteer manning the cart yelped in surprise. Everyone in the lobby turned to look, including the spotter. Jack went down to his knees, apologizing profusely, making a show of trying to clean up the mess with paper napkins that did nothing against the spreading coffee. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it. Let me help." The volunteer was flustered, but not angry, assuring Jack it was an accident. These things happen. Security guards appeared from nowhere, concerned about the mess, but more focused on cleanup than questioning. The spotter hesitated, torn between investigating the disturbance and continuing to wherever he'd been heading. In that moment of hesitation, Doc's voice came through Jack's earpiece. "We're at the van, loading Claire now." Jack kept up his bumbling apology routine, buying precious seconds, while Marcus and Luke got Claire secured in the medical transport. The spotter made his decision and continued toward the reception desk, but by the time he finished asking whatever questions he was asking, the van was pulling away from the service entrance, Claire Bennett inside and headed toward safety. Jack extracted himself from the cleanup effort, declining offers to check him for burns, insisting he was fine, just clumsy, so sorry for the trouble. He made his way back outside in time to see the black SUV peeling out of the parking lot, following the medical transport van at a distance that was professional enough to avoid being obvious, but close enough to maintain pursuit. They're following the van. Jack was already running for his bike. "Marcus, you've got a tail." "I see him." Marcus's voice stayed calm. "Executing evasion protocol." Jack's Harley roared to life, and he pulled out of the lot, taking a parallel route that would intersect with the van's planned path. Luke had mapped 3 different routes to the county line, each with multiple variations depending on what kind of pursuit they faced. The key was leading the SUV away from the van long enough for Doc to get Claire across county lines where Kane's influence ended. The next 20 minutes were a blur of calculated risk and tactical maneuvering. Marcus took the van through residential neighborhoods where speed would attract attention, forcing the SUV to hang back. Luke coordinated from the passenger seat, calling out turns and watching their six. Jack paralleled their route on his bike, ready to cut off pursuit if the SUV got too close. At a 4-way stop, Jack made his move. He pulled in front of the SUV, forcing it to brake hard, then proceeded through the intersection at a crawl that was legal but infuriating. The SUV's driver laid on the horn. Jack ignored it, maintaining his slow pace while the medical transport van took a side street and disappeared from view. By the time the SUV managed to get around Jack, the van was 2 turns away and accelerating toward the county line. The SUV tried to follow but encountered a garbage truck blocking the narrow street, no room to pass. Jack watched in his mirrors as the 2 men in the SUV shouted at each other, frustrated and outmaneuvered. Vans across the county line. Marcus's voice carried satisfaction. "Claire's safe." Jack felt tension drain from his shoulders like water. "Good. Doc, how's our patient? Stable. Vital signs." "Good. She's asking about Sarah." Doc's voice carried gentle amusement. "Wants to know who the hell we are and why we're kidnapping her. Tell her we're friends of Mike's. We'll explain everything when we get her settled." Jack turned his bike back toward Eagle Ridge, mission accomplished. First round goes to us. But the black SUV was still sitting at the intersection, and Jack could see the driver on his phone reporting failure to whoever paid his salary. Kane would know now that Claire was gone, that someone had actively interfered with his plans, that the game had changed from intimidation to open conflict. Good. Jack welcomed it. He was done with shadows and subtlety. Kane wanted a war, Jack would give him one. Sarah was waiting at the diner when Jack arrived, coffee pot in hand, but eyes locked on the door. The relief that crossed her face when she saw him was almost painful in its intensity. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, and Jack's appearance was permission to finally breathe. "Mom." The single word carried every fear and hope Sarah had been holding for 2 years. "Safe. On her way to Carlson County. Doc says she's stable, asking about you, wants to know who we are and why we're kidnapping her." Jack allowed himself a small smile. "She's got spirit." Sarah's laugh came out somewhere between a faint and genuine amusement. "That's Mom. Even when she's being poisoned, she's tough." Maggie appeared from the kitchen, reading the situation instantly. "She's safe." Jack nodded. "Kane's people tried to follow, but we lost them at the county line. Claire's under protection now at a facility Kane can't reach." Maggie's weathered face creased with the first genuine smile Jack had seen from her. "Mike would have been proud. Of all of you," The words hit harder than Jack expected. He'd spent 3 years convinced he'd failed everyone who mattered, Emily, his ex-wife himself. Being told Mike would have been proud felt like absolution he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Sarah set down the coffee pot with shaking hands. What happens now? Now we find the evidence Mike collected before he died. Jack gestured for Sarah to sit at the counter. Your mother said Mike told her the truth was hidden where honor lives. You have any idea what that means? Sarah's brow furrowed in concentration. Where honor lives, that sounds like something Dad would say, but I don't. She stopped, her eyes widening. The flag case, Jack felt pieces clicking together. Mike's burial flag. It's mounted in our living room. Sarah's words came faster now, remembering. Dad was so specific about wanting that case. Had it custom made, designed it himself. Mom thought he was just being sentimental. But what if he built a hiding place into it? Marcus had entered the diner behind Jack, Luke following. Makes sense. Mike knew he was in danger. Would have wanted insurance, something Kane couldn't find, even if he searched the house. We need to get to that flag case. Jack looked at Sarah. How fast can you get us into your apartment? We can go now. Lunch rush won't start for another hour. Sarah was already untying her apron. But if Kane has people watching, then we go in the back fast and quiet. Luke's deep voice carried confidence. Marcus and I clear the building first. You and Jack follow. We get the evidence and get out. 5 minutes maximum exposure. The apartment complex was typical for Eagle Ridge, 2 stories of faded stucco, external staircases, parking lot half full of vehicles that had seen better decades. Sarah's unit was on the second floor corner position, with windows facing the parking lot and the desert beyond. Not ideal from a security perspective, but at least they'd see anyone coming. Luke and Marcus went up first, moving with the kind of casual competence that made them look like maintenance workers or friends helping with furniture. Jack stayed with Sarah in Maggie's truck, watching sight lines, looking for the black SUV or any other vehicle that seemed out of place. Clear. Marcus's voice came through the radio. Building's empty. Come on up. Jack and Sarah climbed the external stairs quickly, not running but moving with purpose. The apartment door stood open, Luke's bulk filling the frame as he maintained watch. Inside, the space was small but clean, the kind of place where someone lived out of necessity rather than choice. A couch that had seen better days, a kitchenette with appliances from the 80s, family photos on every available surface creating a shrine to better times. The flag case dominated one wall. Old Glory folded in perfect military triangles, displayed in a shadow box made of dark wood with glass front and brass hinges. Beneath the flag, Mike Bennett's service medals were arranged with precision: National Defense Service Medal, Southwest Asia Service Medal, Kuwait Liberation Medal. The case itself was beautiful in its simplicity, the kind of craftsmanship that spoke of love and care. Sarah reached for it, then stopped. I hate disturbing it. It's the last thing of Dad's we have. Jack understood viscerally. Emily's room still sat untouched in his ex-wife's house, a shrine to a daughter who would never come home. Sometimes the dead deserved their monuments left intact. Mike built this knowing someone might need it someday. Jack's voice was gentle. He'd want us to find what he hid. Sarah lifted the case off its mounting bracket with reverent care. The back was sealed with small screws, and Marcus already had a screwdriver kit out, making quick work of the fasteners. The backing came away to reveal nothing. Just the hollow interior of the frame, exactly as it should be. Sarah's face fell. I was so sure. Wait. Jack studied the frame dimensions, comparing internal space to external measurements. There's a gap. The frame's deeper than it needs to be. Luke ran his fingers along the interior edges, pressing, probing. Found it. A quiet click in a section of the frame's bottom popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a USB drive, wrapped in plastic and secured with tape. Also several pages of printed documents, photographs, and a letter in an envelope, addressed simply, to whoever comes to finish this. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. Mike Bennett's handwriting, precise and clear. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Kane killed me directly or indirectly, doesn't matter. What matters is the evidence on this drive. Financial records proving bribery of town officials, falsified safety reports that led to building collapses, documentation of intimidation and violence against residents who wouldn't sell, and photos of Kane's security chief stabbing me in that bar while Kane watched from his car and gave the order. I'm trusting you to finish this, to protect my family, to make sure Kane answers for his crimes. If you're a Marine, you understand duty and honor. If you're not, I hope you'll honor my sacrifice anyway. Tell Claire I loved her. Tell Sarah she was the best thing I ever did. Tell whoever fights this fight that they're doing God's work. Semper Fidelis, Mike Bennett, Jack's vision blurred with tears he didn't bother hiding. Mike had known, had accepted his death was coming, and prepared for it with the same calm professionalism he'd shown in combat. Had trusted that someone, brother, friend, stranger with conscience, would eventually find this message and carry on the fight. I got you, Mike, Jack's voice came out rough. I got you, brother. Sarah read the letter over Jack's shoulder, her own tears falling freely. He knew he was going to die. Marcus examined the USB drive. We need to copy this. Multiple redundant backups. If Kane learns we have this, he'll do anything to destroy it. More than that, Jack's tactical mind was already working through implications. We need to use this as bait. Let Kane know we have it. Force him to come after us instead of Sarah. That's dangerous. Luke's objection was reasonable. Kane's got resources, people, money. We're 4 old vets with nothing but our bikes and each other. Exactly. Jack met his brother's eyes. We've got nothing to lose. Kane's got everything to lose. That makes us more dangerous than he can imagine. Doc's voice came through the radio from his position, watching the street below. We've got company. 2 vehicles, both black SUVs. 6 men armed. They're positioning around the building. How long? Jack was already moving, gathering the evidence, securing it in his jacket. 2 minutes, maybe less. Sarah's face went pale. They're here for me. No, Jack's voice carried absolute certainty. They're here for this. The evidence, Kane's finally figured out where Mike hid it. Then we give it to them. Sarah reached for the USB drive. I don't want anyone dying for Jack's hand closed over hers, stopping her. Your father died for this. Died believing someone would finish what he started. I'm not disrespecting his sacrifice by handing it over to the men who killed him. But no buts. We fight, we run, we do whatever necessary, but we don't surrender. That's not what Marines do. The apartment door exploded inward, cheap wood splintering around the lock. 3 men poured through, weapons drawn, moving with professional precision that told Jack these weren't local thugs. These were trained operators, probably ex-military themselves, hired for exactly this kind of situation. Luke hit the first man with a tackle that would have made NFL scouts weep, driving him into the doorframe, hard enough to crack drywall. Marcus spun and delivered a kick to the second man's knee, hyperextending it with a sound like a branch snapping. The third man got his weapon up, aiming at Jack, who threw the flag case at him. Mike's shadow box hit the gunman in the face, glass shattering, the American flag unfurling as the case broke apart. The symbolism wasn't lost on Jack, even in the chaos. Mike Bennett's final service to his country, protecting his daughter one last time. Go. Jack shoved Sarah toward the apartment's back window that opened onto a fire escape. Doc, bring the truck around back. We're coming out hot. The remaining 3 men from the SUVs were already pounding up the external stairs. Jack, Marcus, and Luke formed a defensive line, letting Sarah climb through the window first. These weren't men Jack wanted to kill. They were just soldiers following orders, same as he'd been once upon a time. But he would kill them if necessary to protect Sarah and Mike's evidence. One of the men from the stairs appeared in the doorway, assessed the situation, and made a call that probably saved lives on both sides. Fall back. They're armed and positioned. We need more men. The tactical retreat gave Jack precious seconds. Marcus and Luke went through the window after Sarah, Jack following last, pausing only to grab the American flag from where it had fallen among the debris. Mike's flag, Emily's flag, the symbol of everything they'd all fought for and lost and were still fighting for, despite everything. The fire escape rattled under their combined weight rust, flaking away from bolts that hadn't been tested in years. Sarah was already at the bottom, pulling Maggie's truck alongside with perfect timing. They piled in, Jack in the passenger seat, Marcus driving Luke and Sarah in the back. Gunfire erupted from above, warning shots probably meant to disable the vehicle rather than kill occupants. A round punched through the truck's rear window safety glass, crackling into a spiderweb pattern. Sarah screamed. Luke covered her with his body, years of combat instinct overriding conscious thought. Marcus floored the accelerator, and the truck lurched forward, tires squealing. More gunfire, but they were moving now, putting distance between themselves and Kane's people. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline singing through veins that hadn't carried this kind of charge in years. "Everyone okay?" He twisted to check the back seat. "We're fine." Luke's voice was steady despite having just used his body as a human shield. "Sarah, I'm okay." Her voice shook but held. "I'm okay." "Where to?" Marcus navigated through residential streets, taking random turns to throw off pursuit. "Maggie's." Jack made the decision instantly. "Kane won't hit a public place in broad daylight. Too many witnesses. We regroup there, plan our next move." The diner appeared ahead, blessed and ordinary. Marcus pulled into the back lot, and they scrambled inside through the kitchen entrance, Maggie taking one look at their faces and locking both doors without being asked. "Counters closed for private party." She flipped the sign and pulled shades over the windows. "Anyone asks, we're having a family emergency," which ain't even a lie. They gathered in a back booth, Jack spreading the evidence on the table while his heart rate gradually returned to something approaching normal. The USB drive had survived the chaos. So had most of the documents, though some were crumpled and one had a corner stained with blood, Jack's from a cut he didn't remember receiving. Sarah stared at the evidence with something approaching horror. "My father died for this. Men just tried to kill us for this. Is it really worth all that?" Jack met her eyes and spoke truth. "Your father thought it was. Thought stopping Kane was worth dying for." "I'm inclined to agree, but what's on there? What could be so important?" Doc had pulled out his laptop and was already plugging in the USB drive. "Let's find out." The files loaded slowly, security encryption requiring passwords that Mike had helpfully included in his letter. Financial spreadsheets, scanned documents, audio recordings, photos. 3 years of meticulous investigation compressed into digital files that painted a picture of corruption so comprehensive it was almost impressive. Kane had bribed the mayor, 3 city council members, the sheriff, and 2 judges. Had falsified inspection reports on 17 buildings, 3 of which had suffered structural failures resulting in injuries. Had used intimidation and violence against 43 property owners who refused to sell, including 2 cases that resulted in accidental deaths. And had ordered Mike Bennett's murder captured in security footage from the bar's parking lot that clearly showed Kane's security chief following Mike outside and stabbing him from behind while Kane watched from his Cadillac. "Sweet Jesus." Maggie's voice carried shock and fury. "That man is a monster. That man is going to prison." Jack's voice was iron. "This evidence is bulletproof. Federal prosecutors will salivate over it. Kane's done unless he destroys it first." Marcus voiced what they were all thinking. "He knows we have copies now. He'll come after us with everything he's got." "Good. Let him come." Jack's smile carried no humor. "We'll be ready." But Sarah's face had gone white, staring at something on the laptop screen Doc had pulled up. "That's not possible." What Jack moved to see what she was looking at. The photo showed Kane's security chief, the man who'd stabbed Mike Bennett, standing next to another man in the bar's parking lot. The second man was Bobby Thornton. Bobby was there. Sarah's voice shook with rage and betrayal. "Bobby was there when Dad died. He was part of it, which means Bobby knows exactly who you are and why you've been asking questions." Marcus's face darkened. "He's not just some random thug harassing you. He's Kane's enforcer keeping Mike's daughter in line." Jack felt cold fury settle in his gut. Bobby Thornton had grabbed Sarah's wrist, had threatened her, had been part of the conspiracy that killed Mike Bennett and would have killed Claire if the Brotherhood hadn't intervened. The man wasn't just a symptom of Kane's corruption, he was an active participant in murder. "We need to get you somewhere safe." Jack looked at Sarah. "Kane knows you're with us now. He'll come after you directly." "No." Sarah's voice carried steel Jack hadn't heard before. "I'm not hiding while you finish this. Dad died fighting Kane. I'm not dishonoring his memory by running away." Sarah Jack started. "No." She cut him off, eyes blazing. "You said Mike would want someone to finish what he started. I'm his daughter. This is my fight. You've all risked your lives for me and Mom. Let me stand with you. Let me be part of taking Kane down." Jack saw Mike Bennett in Sarah's eyes. The same stubborn courage. The same refusal to back down from what was right even when backing down was safer. The same willingness to risk everything for principle. Marcus spoke before Jack could. She's right. This is her fight. Her father, her mother, her life, Kane's been destroying. Keeping her locked away while we handle it dishonors Mike's sacrifice and Sarah's courage. Luke nodded, plus Kane's already coming for her. Might as well let her help us make sure he fails. Jack looked at each of his brothers, reading agreement in their faces. Then he looked at Sarah, seeing determination and fear and courage all tangled together. Finally, he looked down at Mike's letter at the words, "Tell Sarah she was the best thing I ever did." All right, Jack made the decision. You're in, but you follow orders, stay behind us when things get violent, and if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed, agreed. Sarah's smile carried relief and gratitude. Thank you, don't thank me yet. Jack started gathering the evidence. We've got a war to plan, and Kane's not going to make it easy. The rest of the afternoon passed in tactical planning and strategic preparation. Doc made multiple encrypted copies of the USB drive, distributing them to secure locations, including a safety deposit box in another state and a lawyer's office with instructions to release everything if the Brotherhood went dark. Marcus contacted state police, bypassing Sheriff Crawford entirely, and arranged a meeting with a federal prosecutor. Luke reinforced the diner's security, installing cameras and hardening entry points. And Jack sat with Mike's letter, reading and rereading words written by a dead brother who trusted that someone would finish his fight. The weight of that trust pressed down on Jack's shoulders like physical burden, but for the first time in 3 years, burden felt like purpose instead of crushing obligation. Emily, I'm doing something that matters. His whispered words to his daughter's memory came easier now. I'm protecting someone who needs it, finishing a brother's mission, being the warrior I should have been. The phone in his pocket vibrated. Unknown number. Jack answered cautiously. Mr. Miller. The voice was smooth, educated, carrying confidence born of decades of getting what he wanted. This is Victor Kane. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Jack's hand tightened on the phone. Evidence of your crimes isn't yours, Kane. It belongs to Mike Bennett's memory and every person you've hurt. A pause, then Kane's voice returned colder. You're making a mistake. Return the evidence, leave town, and I'll forget this happened. Refuse, and I'll destroy you and everyone you care about. Jack's laugh carried no humor. I'm 65 years old with stage 4 cancer. I've got maybe 6 months to live. My daughter's dead, my marriage is over, and I've been waiting to die for 3 years. You think threats scare me? Another pause, longer this time, Kane recalculating based on new information. Then perhaps you care about Mike Bennett's daughter. She's very vulnerable. So many things could happen to her. The threat ignited fury in Jack's chest, white hot and clarifying. You come after Sarah Bennett and it'll be the last thing you do. I promise you that. Bold words from a dying man, not dying yet. And I've got enough life left to make sure you pay for killing Mike Bennett, poisoning Claire Bennett, and terrorizing their daughter. You're done, Kane. It's just a matter of how hard you want to make it on yourself. Kane's voice dropped to deadly quiet. I've survived challenges from better men than you, Mr. Miller. I'll survive you too. The line went dead. Jack set down the phone and looked around the diner at his brothers, at Sarah, at Maggie. They were all watching him, waiting to hear what Kane had said. He knows about my cancer, knows I'm dying, tried to use it as leverage. Marcus's expression darkened. And I told him I've got enough life left to finish this. Jack stood, rolling his shoulders, feeling old injuries protest. Kane's scared. Scared men make mistakes. We push him, keep the pressure on, force him into doing something stupid. What if he comes after Sarah directly? Doc voiced the fear they all shared. Then he learns what happens when you threaten a Marine's daughter. Jack's voice carried absolute conviction. We protect her, whatever it takes. No matter the cost. The sun was setting when Sheriff Crawford's cruiser pulled up outside the diner. The lawman climbed out slowly, hand resting on his service weapon, eyes scanning the parking lot before settling on the diner's windows. He couldn't see inside through the shaded glass, but he knew they were there. Knew what they'd done at the hospital. Knew Kane wanted them stopped. Crawford entered the diner with exaggerated caution posture, suggesting he expected violence. Maggie met him at the door, arms crossed, expression unwelcoming. We're closed for private party, Sheriff. I can see that. Crawford's eyes found Jack at the back booth. Need to talk to Jackson Miller. Jack stood, hands visible, non-threatening. I'm right here, Sheriff. What can I do for you? You interfered with medical care this morning. Kidnapped a patient from Hillside Care Center. That's a felony. That patient is Claire Bennett being poisoned by her doctor on Victor Kane's orders. We saved her life. Jack kept his voice level. And we've got evidence proving it. Want to see Crawford's face twitch to uncertainty showing. I don't know what you think you know. We know Mike Bennett was murdered by Kane's people. We know Claire was being slowly poisoned. We know you've been paid to look the other way. Jack pulled out his phone showing a photo of the financial documents. Want me to keep going, or would you rather get in front of this before federal prosecutors show up and arrest everyone on Kane's payroll? The sheriff's hand dropped from his weapon, fear replacing bluster. I didn't know. You knew enough, Marcus's voice cut through Crawford's stammering. Question is whether you're Kane's man or the law's man. Choose carefully. Your next words determine whether you go to prison with Kane or get immunity for testimony. Crawford looked around the diner, seeing 4 combat veterans who'd faced down worse threats than a small-town sheriff, seeing Maggie Henderson, whose family had lived in Eagle Ridge for 3 generations, seeing Sarah Bennett, whose father he'd failed to protect. The weight of his choices pressed down visibly on shoulders that had carried corruption for too long. What do you want from me? The sheriff's voice came out defeated. The truth. Jack stepped closer. Everything you know about Kane's operations. Names, dates, payments. You testify to federal investigators, you might walk away from this with your freedom. Stay loyal to Kane, you'll share his cell block. Crawford slumped into a booth looking older than his 50-odd years. Kane's been paying me for 12 years. Started small traffic tickets, fixed building inspections overlooked. Got bigger, bigger. By the time I realized what I'd become, part of getting out would have meant prison anyway. What about Mike Bennett? Sarah's voice shook with controlled fury. Did you know Kane was going to kill him? Crawford looked at her, shame written across his features. I knew Mike was asking dangerous questions. Warned Kane that Mike was getting close to evidence. Didn't know Kane would. He stopped, swallowed. Yes, I knew. Maybe not specifics, but I knew Kane would stop him permanently. Sarah launched herself across the diner, rage overwhelming self-control. Luke caught her before she reached Crawford, holding her back while she screamed, You let them kill my father. You knew and you did nothing. I'm sorry, Crawford's voice broke. I'm so goddamn sorry. I was scared. Kane threatened my family. Said if I didn't play along, my wife would have an accident. My kids would. You could have gone to the FBI. Jack's voice carried disgust. Could have done the right thing. Instead, you helped Kane murder a Marine and poison his widow. You don't get absolution just because you were shared. Crawford nodded, defeated. You're right, I'll testify. Give you everything. Just promise me my family stays safe. Kane can't reach them. We'll make sure of it. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling our federal contact right now. You're going into protective custody tonight. Kane won't be able to touch you or yours. As Marcus made the call, Jack sat across from Crawford, studying the broken man who'd chosen corruption over courage. How many people did Kane hurt because you looked the other way? Crawford's eyes filled. Too many. God help me, too many. God might. Jack's voice was iron. But Mike Bennett's daughter won't. You live with that. The evening that followed was a blur of federal agents' protective custody arrangements and tactical planning. Crawford was whisked away to a safe house, his family following under guard. The federal prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Alvarez, who'd made her career taking down corrupt officials, reviewed the evidence with barely concealed excitement. This is the most comprehensive documentation of municipal corruption I've seen in 20 years. Alvarez's eyes gleamed as she scrolled through the files. Kane the mayor, half the city council, 2 judges, and the sheriff all wrapped up in a bow. Mike Bennett did incredible work. Mike Bennett died for that work. Sarah's voice carried grief and pride tangled together. He deserves credit. He'll get it. Alvarez looked at Sarah with sympathy. When this goes to trial, your father will be remembered as a hero who stood up when no one else would. When does the trial happen? Jack asked. When do you move on Kane arrests? Start tomorrow morning. Federal marshals will execute warrants simultaneously on Kane, his son, and 8 other conspirators. By this time tomorrow, Victor Kane's empire will be in ruins. Jack felt satisfaction settle in his chest. Good, that's good. But Alvarez's expression turned serious. Kane's dangerous. He knows his time is short. Men like him don't go quietly. You all need to be careful, stay somewhere secure until the arrests are complete. We'll be fine. Jack's confidence wasn't bravado. We've handled worse. After the feds left the Brotherhood and Sarah regrouped at the diner. Maggie had prepared food nobody felt like eating, but they forced themselves to consume fuel their bodies would need for whatever came next. The atmosphere was strange relief at Crawford's confession, anticipation of Kane's imminent arrest, but also nervous tension because experience taught that operations never went perfectly clean. Sarah sat beside Jack, picking at her food without eating. It's really almost over. Almost. Jack covered her hand with his. Tomorrow, Kane gets arrested. Then comes trial, probably takes a year or more. But you and your mother will be safe. That's what matters. What happens to you? Sarah's question carried weight. After Kane's arrested and Mom's recovering, what happens to the Brotherhood? We go back to what we do. Jack's smile was gentle. Help veterans. Ride. Live whatever time we've got left, doing something that matters. How long do you have? Sarah's eyes found his. Really, Jack had never been good at lying. 6 months, maybe less. Cancer's pretty aggressive. Sarah's tears fell silently. You came here to die protecting me. I came here to live protecting you. Jack's correction was important. First time in 3 years I felt alive. Your father gave me that gift twice, once in Kuwait, once through you. I'm grateful. They sat in comfortable silence, two people bound by shared loss and newfound purpose. Outside, Eagle Ridge settled into another night of slow decline. But tomorrow, federal marshals would sweep through like avenging angels, and Victor Kane's reign of corruption would end. Jack allowed himself to feel hope for the first time since Emily's funeral. Mike's mission was almost complete. Sarah and Claire would be safe. Justice would be served, and Jack would have died or lived for something that mattered. Emily, I did it. His silent words to his daughter felt like prayer. I protected someone, finished Mike's fight, made my last days count. You'd be proud, baby girl. In the gathering darkness, 4 old warriors and 1 young woman waited for dawn to break and justice to arrive. They'd fought through worse odds. They'd survived worse dangers. Tomorrow they'd see Mike Bennett's sacrifice honored and his family protected. Tomorrow was going to be a good day. Dawn broke over Eagle Ridge with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything look sharp-edged and dangerous. Jack stood outside the diner, coffee steaming in the cold air, watching federal vehicles position themselves throughout the town like chess pieces, preparing for checkmate. 3 black SUVs, 2 unmarked sedans, all carrying U.S. Marshals and FBI agents who'd driven through the night to execute arrest warrants on Victor Kane and his empire of corruption. Jennifer Alvarez pulled up in her own vehicle, power suit, and bulletproof vest, creating an incongruous combination. She approached Jack with the kind of energy that came from lawyers who'd finally landed the case that would define their careers. We move in 20 minutes. Her voice carried controlled excitement. Simultaneous arrests of Kane, his son Victor Jr., Bobby Thornton, and 5 other key conspirators. By noon, Kane's organization will be dismantled. Jack nodded, but something cold and sharp twisted in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 wars and 100 firefights. Too easy. This is wrapping up too clean. What do you mean? Alvarez's professional confidence faltered slightly. Kane's smart, ruthless. He built an empire on staying 3 steps ahead of people trying to stop him. Jack's eyes scanned the street, cataloging sight lines and defensive positions from pure habit. You really think he's just sitting in his house, waiting for you to knock on his door? He doesn't have a choice. Alvarez gestured to the federal vehicles. We've got the evidence. We've got Crawford's testimony. Kane's options are surrender or run, and running just makes it worse for him. Unless he's already running. Marcus appeared beside Jack, own coffee in hand, reading his brother's concerns without words needing to be spoken. Or unless he's planning something we haven't anticipated. Alvarez's phone buzzed before she could respond. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. When the conversation was brief and one-sided. When Alvarez hung up, her professional composure had cracked into something approaching fear. Kane's house is empty. The marshals who did advance reconnaissance just reported back. No vehicles, no security, no sign anyone's been there since last night. She looked at Jack with dawning horror. He's gone. Jack felt ice settle in his veins. Not gone. Hunting. Sarah. Marcus's single word carried all the dread Jack was feeling. Kane knows she's the key. Kill her and Crawford's testimony becomes hearsay about a dead man's daughter who can't verify anything. The three of them were already moving, running for their vehicles. Jack's Harley roared to life, Marcus and Luke beside him on their own bikes. Doc appeared from inside the diner, reading the situation instantly from their faces. Kane's coming for Sarah. Jack's voice cut through the engine noise. Where is she? Still inside. Doc's hand moved to his waistband where Jack knew he kept a pistol. Maggie's with her. There, the explosion cut off whatever Doc was about to say. Not inside the diner, but close enough to rattle windows and send a plume of black smoke rising into the morning sky from the direction of Sarah's apartment building. Jack's apartment, where Kane thought Sarah still lived. That's a diversion. Jack's combat instincts screamed warnings his conscious mind was still processing. Kane wants us focused on the explosion while he hits the real target. The diner. Luke was already moving toward the entrance when Jack saw them, three vehicles approaching from different directions, boxing in the parking lot with tactical precision that spoke of military training. Not sheriff's deputies, not local muscle. Professional operators moving with coordinated purpose. Inside, now Jack was through the diner door before he finished, shouting, Marcus and Luke flanking him, Doc bringing up the rear. Maggie and Sarah were behind the counter, Maggie's shotgun already in her hands. Sarah's face pale but determined. Back room. Jack made the tactical assessment in seconds. The diner's front was all glass, indefensible. The kitchen had one door reinforced with limited sight lines for attackers. Not great, but better than being trapped in a fishbowl. They moved as one, Jack herding Sarah ahead of him, Maggie following with her shotgun, Marcus and Luke covering the retreat. Doc threw the deadbolt on the back door and started pushing a heavy steel prep table against it as an improvised barricade. How many? Sarah's voice shook but held steady. Jack counted vehicles and probable occupants. 15, maybe 20 professional contractors, probably ex-military. Kane spent serious money on this. Can we hold them? Maggie chambered around in her shotgun with the kind of competence that spoke of decades living in a place where law enforcement was 30 minutes away on a good day. Long enough for the feds to get here. Jack pulled out his phone, already dialing Alvarez. We've got defensible position, limited entry points, and the first burst of automatic weapons fire shattered every window facing the street simultaneously. Glass exploded inward in a deadly rain, booths and tables disintegrating under concentrated fire designed to suppress rather than kill. Jack threw himself over Sarah, covering her body with his own, while Marcus and Luke returned fire through the shattered windows, forcing Kane's people to take cover. Alvarez's voice came through Jack's phone, tinny and distant under the gunfire. What's happening? We're hearing shots. Kane's hitting the diner. 20 shooters, automatic weapons, professional execution. Jack's voice stayed level despite chaos erupting around him. How fast can you get here? 5 minutes. Marshals are already moving. Hold on, Jack. The line went dead. 5 minutes, an eternity in combat. Jack had seen entire battles won or lost in 5 minutes. Had seen men die in the seconds between heartbeats. 5 minutes was forever when people were shooting at you. Marcus Jack called over the sound of gunfire. How's our ammunition situation? 3 magazines for my pistol. Marcus was positioned behind an overturned table, returning fire with controlled precision. Luke's got similar. Doc 2 mags. Doc had moved to cover the back door, weapon drawn. If they try to breach from the rear, we're in trouble. Maggie's shotgun boomed and Jack heard a scream from outside. 1 shell left after that. The old woman's face was grim but steady. Then I make it count, a voice called from outside, amplified through a megaphone. Jackson Miller, you're surrounded. Send out Sarah Bennett and we let everyone else walk away. You've got 60 seconds to decide. Jack looked at Sarah, who'd wedged herself into the corner of the kitchen, pale but composed. They were asking him to trade her life for his own and his brother's. Asking him to break the promise he'd made to Mike Bennett, to dishonor the code he'd lived by for 65 years. Over my dead body. Jack's response needed no amplification to carry. Kane wants her, he goes through me first. The answering burst of gunfire suggested Kane's people had expected that response. Bullets punched through the diner's thin walls, ricocheting off kitchen equipment, sparking against steel surfaces. Sarah screamed and covered her head. Maggie crouched beside her shotgun, ready, placing her own body as additional shield. Luke grunted, hit, but still firing back, blood spreading across his shoulder. Flesh wound. He kept shooting, teeth gritted against pain. Takes more than that. Marcus's weapon clicked empty. He dropped the magazine, loaded his second, kept fighting. Jack, we can't hold this position. They're going to rush us, and when they do, I know. Jack's mind raced through tactical options and found them all terrible. The back door was their only exit, but Kane's people would be watching it. The moment they tried to run, they'd be cut down in the open. Unless someone created a distraction. Unless someone bought time for Sarah to escape while drawing all fire onto themselves. Jack looked at his brother's Marcus with one magazine, left Luke bleeding and down to his last rounds, Doc positioned at the back door with maybe 30 bullets total. Looked at Maggie with her single shotgun shell. Looked at Sarah, Mike Bennett's daughter, the girl he'd promised to protect no matter the cost. The math was simple and brutal. Someone had to stay behind. Someone had to make the stand that would let the others escape. And Jack was the only one dying anyway. Listen up. Jack's command voice cut through the chaos, making everyone focus on him despite the continuing gunfire. Doc, when I give the signal, you take Sarah out the back. Marcus and Luke provide covering fire. Maggie, you go with them. Get to federal vehicles. They're 5 minutes out. What about you? Sarah's question carried the weight of already knowing the answer. I'm buying you time. Jack checked his pistol. 2 magazines left, 30 rounds total. Not enough to win, but enough to make Kane's people focus entirely on him instead of pursuing Sarah. Jack, no. Marcus's objection was immediate. We don't leave brothers behind. That's not how we operate. Mike didn't leave me behind in Kuwait. Jack met Marcus's eyes. Now I'm returning the favor to his daughter. This is what he'd want. What he'd do if our positions were reversed. Brother Luke started. This is my call. Jack's voice carried finality that left no room for argument. I'm dying anyway. 6 months in a hospital bed, or 6 minutes buying Sarah's escape, I know which one Mike would choose. I know which one I choose. Sarah was crying, shaking her head. You can't. I won't let you die for me. Jack crossed to where she crouched, cupped her face in his scarred hands, forced her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. Your father gave me 34 years I wouldn't have had. Years that included my own daughter, my own life, everything good I ever experienced. This is me paying that debt. This is me dying the way a warrior should, protecting someone worth protecting. I don't want you to die. Sarah's tears fell freely now. I don't want to die either. Jack's smile was gentle despite the chaos. But we don't always get what we want. What I want is for you to live, to go to college like your dad hoped, to have the life Mike fought to protect. That's worth dying for. He kissed her forehead, the gesture paternal and final. You're worth it, Sarah. Never doubt that. Jack turned to his brothers. Marcus, Luke, you've kept me alive for 3 years when I wanted to die. Thank you for that. But this is better. This matters. This is the death Emily would want for me. Marcus's face worked with emotion he was fighting to control. Semper Fi, brother. Always faithful. Jack gripped Marcus's shoulder hard. Now get ready to move on my signal. The next 60 seconds stretched like hours, while Jack positioned himself at the destroyed front of the diner, taking cover behind the counter, where he had sight lines on all approaches. His brothers moved to the back, weapons ready to provide covering fire during Sarah's escape. Maggie stayed close to Sarah's shotgun, in gnarled hands, ready to use that last shell if anyone got too close. Jack took a deep breath, feeling his body catalog its various pains and failures, knees that barely worked, ribs that ached from yesterday's fight, the cancer eating his lungs from inside. 65 years of hard use, and now he was going to spend it all in one final transaction. Emily, watch over me. Mike, I'm coming to see you. The prayers came without conscious thought. If there's anything after this, save me a seat. We've got stories to trade. He stood up, exposing himself to fire, and opened up with his pistol, not aimed at suppression, fire like his brothers had been using, but accurate, deliberate shots that dropped 2 of Kane's people before they could take cover. Drawing every eye, every weapon, every bit of attention onto himself, and away from the back door where Sarah would be escaping. Now go, Jack's shout was nearly lost in the eruption of return fire that came his way. Doc yanked open the back door. Marcus and Luke laid down covering fire. Sarah ran Maggie beside her, both of them sprinting for the cover of vehicles in the bush, a lot where federal agents would be arriving any second. Jack kept shooting, kept moving, kept being the target that couldn't be ignored. A bullet caught him in the left shoulder, spinning him around. Another in his right thigh, dropping him to one knee. Pain exploded through his body, but Jack kept firing. Magazine running dry, dropping it, loading his last, continuing to shoot. 13 rounds left, then 12, then 11. Kane's people were advancing now, confident their target was wounded and nearly out of ammunition. Jack counted them 7, still standing, moving with tactical precision, probably thinking this dying old man would surrender rather than fight to the last bullet. They didn't know Marines. Jack emptied his weapon into the advancing line, each shot placed with 65 years of experience and training. 3 more men dropped. 4 left. Gun clicked empty, out of ammunition, but not out of fight. He grabbed a knife from the counter, just a kitchen knife, but Maggie kept them sharp and braced himself against the counter because his leg wouldn't hold weight anymore. The 4 remaining shooters entered the diner cautiously, weapons trained on Jack, probably wondering why this old man wasn't begging for his life. Behind them, Jack heard sirens. Federal vehicles arriving, marshals deploying. Sarah was safe. Mission accomplished. He smiled at Kane's people through blood and pain. You boys got played. Spent all your ammunition and time on me while the real target got away. Your boss is going to be pissed. One of them, the leader Jack guessed from his positioning, lowered his weapon slightly. You're dying, old man. We can call an ambulance. You don't have to. Jack laughed, the sound wet and painful. I'm dying anyway, cancer. 6 months, maybe less. But I got to choose how. Got to die protecting someone worth protecting. That's more than most people get. The sirens were close now, maybe 30 seconds away. Kane's people exchanged glances, calculating odds of escape versus the certainty of federal arrest if they stayed. The leader made the decision for all of them. Fall back, mission scrubbed. They withdrew in professional order, leaving Jack bleeding out behind the diner counter. He let himself slide down back against the cabinets, hand pressed to the shoulder wound that was pumping blood with each heartbeat. The thigh wound was worse arterial, probably given how much blood was pooling around him. Should have been more scared. Should have felt panic as his life bled out onto Maggie's diner floor. But Jack just felt tired and strangely peaceful. He'd done it. Kept his promise to Mike. Protected Sarah. Died like a warrior instead of wasting away in a hospital bed. Emily's photo was in his pocket. Jack pulled it out with trembling, blood-slicked fingers, looked at his daughter's smile one last time. I did good, baby girl. Saved someone. Mattered. You'd be proud. Footsteps pounded through the diner, federal agents, Marcus's voice calling his name, but they all sounded distant and unimportant compared to the quiet settling over Jack's consciousness. So tired, so ready to rest. Hands pressed against his wounds, trying to stop bleeding that couldn't be stopped. Voices shouting for medics. Someone, Marcus, probably crying while trying to keep pressure on injuries that had already done their fatal work. Jack found Marcus's face above him. Tell Sarah, his brother leaned close. Tell her what, Jack? Tell her she's worth it. Worth everything. Her dad would be proud. Jack's voice was fading, words requiring effort that was getting harder to summon. And thank you for giving me 3 more years, for being brothers when I had nothing left. Don't you die on me. Marcus's command voice was broken by grief. God damn it, Jack, don't you die. But Jack was already somewhere else. Vision tunneling, sounds fading. He saw Emily standing in light that didn't hurt his eyes, smiling the way she had when she was alive and happy in his. Saw Mike Bennett in his dress uniform saluting with the kind of respect reserved for warriors who'd completed their final mission. Sarah's safe, Jack's last words came out barely audible. She's safe, Marcus's voice cracked. She's safe, brother. You did it. Good, Jack's eyes closed. That's good. The world went quiet. The pain stopped. And Jackson Miller, Marine Force Recon, 65 years old, and finally at peace, went to join his daughter and his brothers, who'd gone before. Sarah watched from behind federal vehicles as EMTs rushed into the diner, watched them emerge carrying a stretcher bearing a sheet-covered form that could only be Jack. She tried to run to him, but gentle hands held her back. Jennifer Alvarez faced grim, explaining that Jack was gone, that he'd died buying them time, that he'd died a hero. The words meant nothing. Sarah had lost her father 5 years ago to Kane's violence. Now she'd lost the man who'd stepped in to finish what Mike started, the warrior who treated her like the daughter he'd lost. 2 fathers dead because they believed protecting her was worth dying for. Marcus appeared face-haggard, blood covering his hands and shirt. He opened his arms, and Sarah collapsed into them, sobbing against his chest, while this man who'd been Jack's brother held her the way Jack would have if he'd survived. He loved you. Marcus's voice was rough, like you were his own. He was ready to die, but finding you gave him a reason to live first. You gave him that gift. I got him killed. Sarah could barely speak through tears. If I hadn't needed help, if Dad hadn't investigated Kane, if people like Kane weren't evil, none of this would have happened. Marcus pulled back, hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Jack made his choice. Died protecting someone worth protecting. That's a warrior's death. That's the death he wanted. But I needed him. Sarah's voice broke on the admission. I know. Marcus's own eyes were wet. We all did. But Jack needed you too, needed purpose, needed to matter again. You gave him that. These last few days with you, fighting for you, that was him alive again for the first time since Emily died. The diner was a crime scene, now federal agents documenting everything, collecting evidence of the firefight that had turned a small-town breakfast spot into a battlefield. Maggie stood with Luke, who'd been treated for his shoulder wound and refused transport to a hospital, both of them staring at the destruction with shell-shocked expressions. Doc approached Sarah and Marcus, his face older than it had been a week ago. I was with him at the end. He wasn't scared, wasn't in pain. He just let go, like he'd been holding on for years and finally had permission to rest. What do we do now? Sarah's question encompassed everything, the loss, the grief, the sudden absence of the man who'd made her feel safe for the first time since her father died. Now we finish what Jack started. Marcus's voice carried steel beneath the grief. Kane's still out there. He ordered this. He killed Mike, tried to kill him. Claire killed Jack. We make sure he pays for all of it. The federal marshals found Victor Kane 3 hours later, holed up in a hunting cabin 40 miles outside Eagle Ridge with his son and Bobby Thornton. They'd been preparing to flee the country, had fake passports and a chartered plane waiting. The marshals hit the cabin with overwhelming force, and Kane, so used to buying his way out of problems, discovered that money didn't stop bullets or arrest warrants. By nightfall, Kane's son Bobby Thornton and 17 other conspirators were in federal custody. Mayor, city council members, the 2 corrupt judges, all arrested, all facing decades in prison. Mike Bennett's evidence had blown apart an entire network of corruption that had strangled Eagle Ridge for over a decade. Sarah stood in Hillside Care Center's parking lot as the sun set, looking up at her mother's window. Claire had been moved back from Carlson County once the immediate danger passed, and doctors said she was improving rapidly now that the poisoning had stopped. In a few weeks, she'd be strong enough to come home. Home. Sarah wasn't sure where that was anymore. The apartment was destroyed, whether from Kane's explosion or the firefight, she wasn't sure. The diner was a crime scene that would be closed for weeks. Everything familiar had been shattered, and the man who had promised to protect her was dead. Marcus found her there, standing alone in the gathering darkness. Brought you something. He handed her a box, small, wooden, clearly handmade. Sarah opened it to find Jack's Marine Corps medallion, the one he'd worn on his dog tags, alongside a letter in Jack's distinctive handwriting. When did he write this? Last night. Marcus's voice was thick. After everything calmed down, but before this morning. He said if anything happened to him, I should give this to you. Sarah's hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. Baron, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. That's okay, I was dying anyway. And going out protecting you is a hell of a lot better than wasting away in a hospital bed. I want you to know that these last few days with you have been the best I've had since Emily died. You gave me purpose again, made me feel like a father, a protector, a warrior, on all the things I'd stopped being when I lost my daughter. You remind me of Emily in the ways that matter, not looks, but heart, that stubborn courage, that refusal to quit even when quitting would be easier, that capacity to keep loving even when love has cost you everything. Your father saved my life in 1991. I tried to repay that debt by protecting you, but I think I actually got more than I gave. You saved me too, Sarah. Pulled me back from the edge I'd been standing on for 3 years. Gave me a reason to live before I died. I'm giving you my medallion because I want you to remember what it stands for. Honor, courage, commitment. Your father lived by those values. I tried to. Now I'm trusting you to carry them forward. Go to college. Study something that matters. Help people. Fall in love. Have children. Name one Mike if it's a boy. Emily, if it's a girl, tell them about the warriors who loved them before they were born. Live, Sarah. Live fully and without fear. That's what your father wanted. That's what I want. Don't let our deaths be meaningless by refusing to embrace the life we died protecting. You were worth it. Worth everything. Never doubt that. Semper Fidelis. Jack Miller. Sarah clutched the letter and medallion to her chest, grief threatening to drown her. But underneath the grief was something else. Gratitude, purpose, determination to honor the sacrifices made for her. The Brotherhood will take care of you. Marcus's arm came around her shoulders. Your family now. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, we're here. What about Jack? Sarah's voice was small. What happens to him? Military funeral at Arlington. Marcus's pride was evident through the grief. Full honors. They're flying his body to Virginia tomorrow. Emily's buried there. We'll enter Jack beside her the way he wanted. Can I come? The request came out before Sarah fully formed the thought. Marcus smiled sadly. Jack would have wanted you there. We all would. 3 days later, Sarah Bennett stood in Arlington National Cemetery, surrounded by warriors, the Brotherhood in full colors, federal agents who'd worked the case, Marines from Jack's old unit who traveled from across the country to honor a fallen brother. Even Jennifer Alvarez came representing the justice system that had finally caught up to Victor Kane. The honor guard performed their duties with precision, born of practice and reverence. The flag folding the presentation to Marcus as next of kin, the 3-volley salute that echoed across the cemetery's rolling hills. Taps played the mournful notes, carrying on wind that seemed to whisper the names of all the warriors resting in this sacred ground. Sarah placed flowers on Emily's grave, then on Jack's. Father and daughter reunited in death the way they'd been separated by it in life. She pressed her hand to Jack's marker, reading the inscription, Jackson Miller Gunnery Sergeant, USMC Force Reconnaissance, Desert Storm Veteran, 1960-2025, Semper Fidelis. He died protecting those who could not protect themselves. The words Marcus had chosen for the marker seemed inadequate to encompass everything Jack had been, everything he'd done. But then words always fell short when trying to capture warriors. Thank you. Sarah's whispered words were meant for both graves. Thank you for loving me, for protecting me, for showing me what courage looks like. She placed Jack's medallion on his grave, then reconsidered. Jack had given it to her for a reason, wanted her to carry those values forward. She slipped the chain around her neck, feeling the weight of it settle against her chest beside her father's medallion. 2 warriors, 2 medallions. 2 men who died believing she was worth dying for. Sarah would spend the rest of her life trying to be worthy of that belief. The trial of Victor Kane lasted 3 months and became national news. Federal prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of corruption, murder, and racketeering that made even hardened journalists shake their heads in disgust. Mike Bennett's documentation proved every charge, and Crawford's testimony filled in gaps that documents couldn't cover. Kane's defense tried everything, claiming evidence was fabricated, attacking Crawford's credibility, suggesting the Brotherhood had manufactured the case. But the jury saw through it all, saw Kane for what he was, a predator who'd used money and influence to terrorize an entire town. The verdict came back unanimous, guilty on all counts, life in prison without possibility of parole. Sarah was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. Watched Kane's face crumble as he realized money couldn't save him this time. Watched Bobby Thornton led away in chains to serve his own life sentence for murder. Watched justice, real justice, finally being served. Jennifer Alvarez found her in the courthouse hallway afterward. Your fathers would be proud, both of them. This conviction stands as proof that corruption doesn't win forever, that good people fighting back can make a difference. It costs too much. Sarah's voice carried the weight of all the losses. Alvarez nodded solemnly. It did. But Mike and Jack knew the cost when they made their stands. They deemed it worth paying. Now you get to decide if their sacrifice means something or nothing. The words stayed with Sarah through the months that followed, through her mother's full recovery and return home, through the rebuilding of their lives in an Eagle Ridge that was slowly healing from Kane's influence, through the decision to use the scholarship money Jack had left her to study criminal justice at Arizona State. 1 year after Jack's death, Sarah returned to Arlington with the Brotherhood. They'd made it an annual tradition, visiting Jack and Emily, sharing stories, making sure their memories stayed alive. Marcus, Doc, and Luke had all aged visibly over the year, the weight of losing their brother showing in gray hair and deeper lines. But they'd also found new purpose. The Brotherhood had expanded, taking on more cases, helping more veterans, protecting more families. Jack's sacrifice had become the rallying cry, proof that one warrior's stand could change everything. Sarah placed flowers on both graves, then stepped back to let the Brotherhood have their moment. She wore both medallions, now her father's and Jack's, and they'd become her touchstones in difficult moments. Reminders that courage existed, that sacrifice mattered, that love could be stronger than death. A young Marine approached hesitantly dressed uniform, crisp eyes showing the kind of haunted look Sarah had learned to recognize in combat veterans. "Ma'am, I heard stories about Gunnery Sergeant Miller, about how he died protecting a civilian. I wanted to pay my respects." Sarah gestured to Jack's grave. "He was a hero, saved my life, and stopped a corrupt developer who terrorized my town for years." The young Marine knelt, placed his hand on the marker. "That's what we're supposed to do, right? Protect people who can't protect themselves." That's what Jack believed. Sarah's voice caught. He lived it every day, died living it. The Marine stood, saluted Jack's grave with precision that would have made Jack proud. "Semper Fi, Gunny, rest easy. We've got the watch." Sarah watched him walk away, then looked at Marcus. "Does it get easier?" Missing him, no. Marcus's honesty was gentle. "But it gets different. The grief becomes part of you instead of consuming you. You learn to carry it, to honor it." "How do I honor it? How do I make his death mean something?" "You're already doing it." Marcus gestured to her college acceptance letter, visible in her jacket pocket. "You're studying to help people. You're standing up for what's right. You're living the life Jack died protecting. That's how you honor him." Sarah nodded, understanding, settling over her like a blanket. She couldn't bring Jack back, couldn't undo the violence and loss, but she could live fully, courageously, purposefully, could become the kind of person worthy of the sacrifices made for her. That evening, sitting in Maggie's rebuilt diner, stronger now, with bullet-resistant windows and a memorial plaque honoring Jack Miller, Sarah worked on her college application essay. The prompt asked about someone who'd influenced her life. She wrote about her father, about Jack, about warriors who stood up when others looked away. Wrote about honor and courage and commitment. Wrote about the night bikers walked into a diner and changed everything. And she wrote about purpose, about learning that life was worth living fully, even when, especially when it had been bought with someone else's blood. The essay ended with words that felt true in her bones. "Jackson Miller taught me that dying isn't the hard part. Living with purpose, protecting those who need it, standing tall when it would be easier to look away, that's the hard part. He did the hard part every day of his life, and especially on his last day. I carry his medallion now alongside my father's. They're heavy not from the metal, but from the responsibility they represent. The responsibility to be worthy, to make their sacrifices mean something, to live fully and without fear. I'm studying criminal justice because corruption killed my father and the man who avenged him. Because small towns like mine deserve protection from predators who use money and power as weapons. Because warriors like Jack and Mike shouldn't have to die to make the world marginally less terrible. I'm living because Jack died protecting me. That's a debt I can never fully repay, but I can spend my life trying. I can be the person he believed I was: strong, courageous, committed to something larger than myself. Thank you, Jack Miller, for showing me what warriors look like. Thank you for proving that one person's stand can change everything. Thank you for dying so I could live. I promise I'll make it count." Sarah saved the document, feeling something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose, or the strange combination of grief and determination that came from being loved by warriors and watching them die to protect you. Outside, the Arizona sun was setting over Eagle Ridge, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. The town was healing slowly, but healing. New businesses were opening. Young families were moving in. The corruption that had strangled them for years was gone, excised, like cancer leaving space for something better to grow. Sarah touched the medallions around her neck and made a silent promise to the men who'd worn them first. "I'll make you proud. I'll stand up. I'll fight back. I'll be worthy of what you gave me." And somewhere in Arlington, beside his daughter, or in whatever peace warriors found after their final battle, Jack Miller rested easy, mission complete, promise kept, purpose fulfilled. He'd lived long enough to save someone worth saving, Died protecting something worth dying for. Found redemption in his last days after 3 years of wanting death. That was enough. That was everything. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. To the end and beyond the code endured. And Sarah Bennett, carrying 2 medallions and 2 legacies, walked forward into the life 2 warriors had died to give her. She would make it count. Epilogue. 5 years later, the graduation ceremony at Arizona State University was hot, crowded, and interminable. Sarah sat in her cap and gown surrounded by hundreds of other criminal justice graduates waiting for her name to be called. In the audience, Claire Bennett beamed with pride beside an empty seat, a chair reserved for the father who should have been there. But 3 rows back sat the brotherhood. Marcus, Doc, and Luke had driven from Montana wearing their colors with pride despite venue rules against them. They'd earned the right to wear whatever they wanted. They'd buried too many brothers. They'd fought too many battles. They'd kept their promise to Jack Miller by watching over his girl. Sarah Bennett, the name echoed across the auditorium. Sarah walked across the stage, accepted her diploma, and looked out at the audience. Saw her mother crying happy tears. Saw the brotherhood standing in respect, saluting her the way they'd salute a fellow warrior. Saw Jennifer Alvarez, who'd become a mentor, grinning with pride. And felt just for a moment as if her father and Jack were watching too. Proud, at peace, knowing their sacrifices had mattered. After the ceremony, Sarah found the brotherhood waiting with Claire. Marcus handed her a gift, small wrapped simply. Jack would have wanted you to have this. Inside was Jack's challenge coin from Force Recon, worn smooth from decades of carrying. And a note in Marcus's handwriting, "You graduated magna cum laude. You're joining the FBI's anti-corruption task force next month. You're making a difference. Jack would be so damn proud, and so are we. Welcome to the fight, warrior. Semper Fi." Sarah clutched the coin and felt something complete itself. A circle that had started in a diner 5 years ago, when 4 warriors on motorcycles had walked in and changed everything. She was FBI now, would hunt corruption the way her father and Jack had, would protect people who couldn't protect themselves, would stand up when others looked away. Because that's what warriors did. And Sarah Bennett, carrying 2 medallions, 2 legacies, and 1 sacred challenge coin, was a warrior now. The old protectors had died, but their code lived on.